Spoilers. This video contains spoilers for Epic the Musical. I don't know what I'm doing either. If you haven't listened to Epic the Musical, it's like 2.5 hours long. You'll probably like it. Also, there will be timestamps in the description and on the play bar, so you can skip to whatever section that you want. Also, there's going to be very little in terms of visuals, so you're free to just put this on in the background if you want, because you likely won't miss out on much. I just don't have the time to add that many visual elements, unfortunately. Hello, no one, and welcome to a man talking about Epic the Musical for far too long. Why? I don't know, it just seemed like a good idea at the time, I guess. For those of you that don't know who I am, that's not surprising, and if you did, I would be very concerned. But if you come from the subreddit, you might actually recognize me from this image. Yeah, that was me. For those of you not looking at the screen, that's 449,280 minutes spent listening to Epic the Musical in 2025. Obviously, the numbers aren't 100% legit. I think only about 180 to 200k is the real listening minutes, but it's the culmination of a year-long experiment that started because of the 2024 Spotify Wrapped. You can skip to this time if you don't care about this and you just want to get to the actual video. I had originally found out about Epic in late August 2024 or so, but didn't listen to it for the first time until about early to mid-September, if I remember correctly. So when it turns out that I somehow spent 4,000 minutes listening to Epic in just a couple of months, I was very confused. I think what happened was that Spotify was counting streams on both my computer and phone because they were connected, so whenever it was synced up and said playing on X device, it counted that stream separately for some reason. Either that or it was 100% legit, and I should have taken it as a warning. Regardless, I still thought it was off, but it did give me an idea, or rather, a question. How high could I make that number go? Well, 450,000 minutes later, and we have a decent idea. Though the number could have actually been higher. I originally started with just my phone, but about 3 to 4 months in, I realized I could bring my laptop into the equation. Spotify in offline mode still counts the streams, but just doesn't send the data in until you turn offline mode off. So my laptop became a new victim of what future androids would likely consider a war crime. For some reason, it took me until September to realize that I could also do the same with my PC, so I decided to risk thousands of dollars for a stupid little experiment and prayed that it just wouldn't explode. As far as I'm aware, I don't think it has. Yeah, it looks to still be in one piece. If it was any earlier in the year, I'm not sure I would have added it to the experiment, but considering that it was just a few months of keeping it turned on for multiple days at a time, I thought it would be fine. And to be fair, when I eventually cleaned it a few days after the Wrapped came in, the thermal paste was still mostly intact, which was very surprising since I hadn't cleaned it in a long while. It was really dusty, of course, but pretty much fine outside of that. And these were the only 3 devices that I had during the entire experiment. I'm not rich, so I don't have a lot of devices to go with, but, theoretically it could be even higher depending on how many, phones or computers you have, so. Also, before anyone says anything, I've already switched off of Spotify to Tidal. Much better audio quality, if you're into that sort of thing, which I kinda actually am after being on it for a while. There's a lot of details in songs that I just could never hear before. Basically, it's Blu-ray compared to DVD. Plus, it pays the artist like 10 times more at about 1 cent per stream. And that's before you get into all the reasons why you shouldn't support Spotify at all. Anyways, what this video is the first of what will likely be many of me analyzing every single song in Epic the Musical one at a time, as well as a tier list, because why not? The videos will be split into multiple sections to focus on certain aspects of the song and the musical as a whole. We'll start with the positives and negatives, basically things that I think the song does well and what I think it could have done better. Then we'll go to analyzing the lyrics, talking about what they imply, details that I think are interesting, as well as context I may be missing or what could have inspired the line from actual Greek mythology, or at least from my limited knowledge on it. Look, this is my 3rd attempt at recording this video alone. I spent 7 months researching Greek mythology because I was stupid enough to try to animate the entirety of a 2.5 hour musical by myself with literally no experience in animation. Evidently, I'm stupid, but I'm trying to be better. Plus, I don't have all the time in the world to do even more research. Alright? Alright. We'll then do the same with the music itself. As in the motifs and leitmotifs that appear throughout the entire musical. and again, with my even more limited knowledge on music. I'll talk about what their use in the instance could mean, and I'll also talk about potential connections that I may only be making because I'm insane. After that, then we'll do some character analysis for whoever I think is relevant to the song at hand. For this song, it'll just be whatever we can claim in the moment, since it's just the one song. But as we go along, it'll get a lot more complicated with more information and events to analyze. We then move on to observations and my headcannons about the song. I'll mainly talk about details that I think are interesting, again, as well as give my interpretations on certain things. Essentially, a place to talk about things that would have taken too long in earlier segments. And then to end it all off, I'll then rank it on this tier list that took me hours to handmake, then multiple hours more to remake, because the file got corrupted somehow. This entire process has been a nightmare for me. For the ranks on the tier list, we have the following, going from top to bottom. We have S+, which is the best song in a musical, which means that it's only one song. A secret tier, that we'll get to when we get to it. S, S-, A+, A-, B, C, D, and F. Evidently, I think a lot of the songs in the musical are pretty good, so I decided to just expand the S and A ranks in order to give greater depth to my ranking, because a good chunk of the songs fall into those ranks. For B and D, any songs that fall into those rankings don't really need that much depth, and the way I'll rank any that are down that low, if there's multiple, is with a decreasing rank going from left to right, meaning the highest is on the left, lowest is on the right, that sort of thing. And if it's an F, we don't talk about it. I would have another part where I talk about the ideas I have for the previously mentioned animated version that I was going to make, but instead what I'll do is save that for an extra video after I finish an entire saga. There I'll talk about the ideas for the saga and show how my understanding and interpretation of everything visualizes itself in my head. Plus it'll give me a bit of extra time to work on the next video script, since it'll be an extra unscripted video, essentially. Now, when it comes to analyzing the musical itself, there are some things that I would like to mention. First and foremost, these are all just my opinions. I am by no means an expert on anything I talk about. I'm just a man with a lot of mental issues that spent far too long listening to a single musical, so I thought I'd at least use that experience to talk about it. To put it simply though, I don't know jack about shit. The right to share an opinion does not mean said opinion is objectively right. If it was, it would just be fact. If you like a song more than I do, glorious. Enjoy that song as much as you can. There are many people in this world that just don't get the chance to enjoy things like this, or just can't enjoy it much, if at all. So you enjoy that song with all of your heart, because unfortunately, it's not as universal as it should be. And vice versa. If you don't like a song as much, that's completely fine, and honestly, I don't care. I would actually be interested in hearing your own opinions and takes, because there are absolutely things that have never occurred to me despite all of my time listening. Like for instance, quick spoiler warning by the way, I saw somewhere the question of why Odysseus doesn't just take the sirens and sacrifice them to Scylla, and I was honestly shocked that the thought never crossed my mind. Now while I do have many reasons as to why Odysseus wouldn't do that, reasons I'll get into when we get to that point in the musical, the fact that the question never crossed my desk was interesting regardless. So if you have any opinions or takes that you want to share, go ahead and share them, because I myself want to try to understand the musical a little bit better, and analyzing it from a different angle will help me do so. And I can only get that angle with other brains. You know, I only have the one. Well, only the one in my skull, but that's a different matter. Now, when it comes to talking about the characters, I mainly focus on the mental and emotional aspects of their story and the consequences of said aspects. By doing so, it helps me better understand the mentality and the mental state of the character. So when I'm talking about the story and my interpretations, they'll mainly be based off of the mental and emotional aspects and how that sort of drives the character into their decisions. When it comes to the songs, I'm mainly going to be going based off of the songs by themselves for the most part. There isn't an official animated version just yet, nor a stage play to go off of at the time of recording at least, though I do believe both of those are in the works. Jorge does also have videos that explain certain aspects of the musical, but I feel like you should be able to analyze a piece of media and get most of the information you need from it alone. There are also animatics, but those are other people's interpretations for the most part, so I'm not going to really refer to them. Not only that, but there are a lot out there. And again, I don't have all the time in the world. There are technically official animatics that I think Jorge commissioned for the Watch Party live streams, but I'm not going to include those either because they themselves aren't complete, and I don't know how much Jorge impacted the final version of them. Alright, a few more things real quick, then we'll get into the main part of the video itself. Also, no, these won't be at the beginning of every single video. It's just introduce my approach to the analysis. Maybe a quick reminder for future videos, but that's about it. Anyways, when it comes to the tier list, there are of course going to be things that impact its ranking, and I want to share them with you so there's transparency on what I value and how much impact they actually have. Plus it helps you better understand where I'm coming from when analyzing the musical. Going down in descending order of importance, first up we have the storytelling and the potential for storytelling. I myself am actually quite interested in writing, to the degree where my long-term goal in life is probably to write an entire series. This of course means that storytelling itself is a very important thing to me, hence the mental and emotional focus that I mentioned earlier, but also the potential for stories that you don't speak of but allude to with details is also very important. It makes the world seem much more alive than what we see, or at least more experienced in a sense, environmental storytelling and whatnot. I will say though, Jorge does have a massive advantage with the fact that epic is just an interpretation of one story among an entire mythos, so there's definitely a lot of stories to be told. I'm not going to mention them all, however, mainly because I don't know every Greek myth that's ever been told, but there are two notable ones that I will definitely mention later in this video itself. Oh, so you're a fan of mythology? Okay, mention every single myth ever. Does capitalism count for this, or? Now third, the feel of the vocals and the voice acting is also very important to me. Obviously, considering that it's a musical, the vocals better be good. The main thing I'm focusing on, however, is actually the voice acting, because it's something I hold in very high regard. It's kind of like the saying, eyes are the window to the soul. If eyes are the window to the soul, then the voice is the window to the mind. It can tell you what someone is thinking with just what they say, how they say it, and most notably, when they say nothing instead. Now not only that, but when voice acting is bad, it's very noticeable and does not sit well with me. Now I know that it can be difficult to convey emotions while also singing at times, but I will still mention it regardless, as they likely don't affect the outcome too much, and they'll likely be few and far between anyways. I will also be taking into consideration the connected songs. Basically songs that when one ends, another starts right after, or in what would likely be the same moment for the audience for, say, a stage play or an animated version. Songs like The Horse and the Infant and Just a Man, or Open Arms and Warrior of the Mind. Maybe. Most likely. Or the entirety of the Cyclops saga. Also, most likely. Songs like that. The connected song doesn't bear too much weight on the song in the video, but considering that they'd happen in the same moment, plus the fact that we're dealing with a musical, or a story in general, there will inevitably be some overlap, referencing and comparison, so I just wanted to mention that now. Now last but not least, wait no, this is least. And lastly, we have the actual feel of the music, and I kind of mean that literally. Now of course the song just has to be good as a baseline, but I do care a lot about if I can feel the instruments themselves. Basically, when there's the drum in an orchestral piece, I want to be able to feel it resonate within my chest. I want to feel the effects of the instrument the best I can, rather than just hearing a note. Now I know that the actual chance I'll feel the music to any meaningful degree is quite limited, especially considering that I'm listening to it in a digital medium, but it's still very much possible. Like for example, Gasser's Megalovania by Amela, Born of Blood, Risen from Ash by Varian, and Calm Before the Storm by Gentle Love. Now it also being music that involves vocals does make it a bit harder to ensure that the instruments have their impact, mainly for the sake of ensuring that the vocals are audible and understandable, but it is still possible. Like for example, Wee Rabbit's acoustic piano cover of Gangsta's Paradise.
Power and the money, money and the power, minute after minute, hour after hour.
I'll Find a Way by Tell.
No matter who's to blame.
And Seven Nation Army by Ben Munkle. How do you pronounce it?
And I'm talking to myself at night because I can't forget.
Now, not only that, but as far as I'm aware, Epic the Musical is a completely digital production, which also doesn't help in this department. But that's the thing. In the end, it doesn't really affect the ranking that much. Maybe it limits the ceiling of a song, but it's more like a very powerful cherry on top of a really good cake. Like, I like cherries, but if a cake doesn't have it, then that's fine by me. The cake just has to be good. So, with that all out of the way, I think it's finally time that we get into talking about Epic the Musical. Starting, of course, with the first song, The Horse and the Infant. Starting off with the
I like it, cut G.
It's a great opening to Epic, a great opening in general, and I honestly can't imagine anything else being the opening to the entire musical. To put it simply, Jorge was immediately off to the races with the first song. It sets up what the Odyssey is about, as well as what Epic and Odysseus himself is about, with assistance from Just a Man of course, and it manages to do it without losing impact, which is impressive to me, considering that I find most of the setup songs throughout the entire musical to be the weakest. I suppose instead of setup songs I should call them establishing songs, but that doesn't roll off the tongue as well, so setup song it is. Now, I originally thought that it managed to do this because it was over 6 minutes, but that's the thing. It's not even 4 minutes long, clocking in at just 3:54. I don't even know where that misconception came from, but regardless, it's obviously filled with a lot of important information and details that we'll get into in a bit. I will say though, it being a strong setup song may instead be a byproduct of it setting literally everything up rather than just the current saga or even the next song. This means that the timelines from setup to payoff is longer and has more time to build, but it's still strong regardless, so I'll give it its props. Now earlier I mentioned that it sets up the Odyssey, Epic, and Odysseus, so I want to talk about those for a quick moment. The song sets up other concepts as well, but we'll get into those in a bit. Now, The Horse and the Infant sets up what the main inspiration for it is, the Odyssey, and what it's about. That being, as a baseline, Odie's bizarre adventure. A man and his crew trying to get back home after 10 years of war. But it's also about the cost and consequences of victory, and the subsequent hubris that may come with it. But most importantly, it is about the fact that sometimes paranoia and overthinking is actually a good thing. Almost none of the time, but it happened to work out this once, so, there's that. Of course, it also sets up what Epic is about, though most of it is done in Just a Man. What it's about is very similar to the Odyssey, obviously, but with more of a focus on the crew and the story's impact on them. Now, this is honestly expected, considering that we're witnessing the events in real time, rather than hearing about it from Odysseus as he tries to curry favor with the king to get a ride back home, that being King Alcinous of Prusaria. Is that how you pronounce it? A place that isn't exactly kindest to outsiders. Plus the fact that he revealed himself to be the great Odysseus, so he can't exactly make himself out to be the one at fault for most of the time. I'm getting sidetracked. Basically, it takes what the Odyssey is about, but shows us in real time. But it also has its own focuses, such as when does a man become a monster, how far is one person willing to go, and at what point does an action become unjustifiable. Basically, it's just New Game Plus, but with more suffering and mental breakdowns. Put those on the posters. Now, it of course also sets up what Odysseus is about, with more coming in Just a Man. But it still has its own moments here. It shows that Odysseus is a man with great charisma, and the ability to lead and motivate even the greatest of Greek soldiers. It also shows that Odysseus is a man that cares deeply for his family, but a man who also doesn't want to spill blood if it's not necessary, and that he's willing to do what he can to avoid it. A man with virtues that he tries to uphold. It also potentially shows that he appreciates a challenge, something that could be a result of pride from multiple sources. Now, like I mentioned earlier, it sets up other things, such as the important rules and musical elements that will be in play for the rest of the entire musical. What a surprise. Such as the idea that mortals have acoustic instruments for the most part, while gods and supernatural elements are more synthetic in a sense. Also, the idea that a god can make a backup chorus out of nowhere, because they're gods, while mortals would need other people around them for extra vocals. Plus, of course, Odysseus' leitmotif, the danger is no by motif, Penelope's, even Telemachus's, I think. But we'll get into that when we get to it later in the musical analysis section. Now, I actually want to go back to the acoustic versus synthetic instruments for a second to talk about Odysseus. Most characters have an associated instrument. For Athena, it's a piano. For Penelope, it's a viola. For Hermes, he's just got the entirety of disco, really. But for Odysseus, it's a guitar. Or rather, two guitars. Odysseus has an acoustic guitar playing in moments that are more emotional and human, for lack of a better term. While in moments where he is cunning and scheming, it's instead an electric guitar, aka a synthetic instrument. In the Odyssey, Odysseus and Athena are shown to have at least some considerable connection between the two, mainly shown in Book 13 with a pretty heartwarming interaction. Basically, Athena tells Odysseus that she could never abandon him like he thinks she did. But in Epic, their entire relationship is built around the concept of being a warrior of the mind. Odysseus in Epic has been trained by Athena, likely since he was a young child, meaning that his entire mentality, acuity, and cunning could be compared to a literal god's, considering these circumstances. However, this mind doesn't come without faults, as there's dissonance between the mind and the soul, as in the end, he's just a man. Like I mentioned earlier, Odysseus doesn't want to spill blood if he can avoid it, but Athena's entire goal is to create the greatest warrior. So these two aspects are in contention within the same person. He's got the brain of a god, but a human soul. Thus, an electric version of an acoustic whole. All of this to basically say, oh yeah, that's good shit! Apologies. I appear to have lost control there for a second. Anyways, one more thing I want to mention about all of this so far is that setting them up is important, but actually getting them across correctly is vital. It's setting up the subconscious foundation for the audience, which is the bulk of an audience's perception of a piece of media. This is especially important for musical, where people would most likely be focusing on the lyrics more than the music behind it, at least in that moment. If it had visuals, then it would be kinda easier, but we have just audio to work with for the sake of analysis. Speaking of visuals, think of it like this. The lyrics are the dialogue and actions of a scene, while the instruments and music are the camera. The audience is supposed to pay attention to the characters, but the camera is basically telling the audience how they're supposed to feel in a situation on a much more instinctual level. If you don't get something across in the correct way, the audience can and most likely will pick up on something being off, even if they don't get why. This isn't the most important information for this song, but these concepts are likely going to be mentioned in later songs to assess whether Jorge succeeds in sticking to these concepts. Like, as a wide man once said, it's not always about the setup, Spider-Man. It's about the payoffs, baby. Love the payoffs. Let's go, baby. I just realized I've been wearing my headphones this entire time for no reason. Why? Oh, I know why. It's because we're getting into the feel of the music. That was completely unintentional. My mouth is going numb. That water is really cold. What the hell? Now, the song is essentially split into two halves, so we'll look at them separately. For the first half, it starts off slow and quiet to bring the audience up close and personal, likely to put the focus on Odysseus. Then it builds into a nice rhythm that I think Jorge does a great job with the lyrical flow, which is important when you've got a lot of words to get through. One nice touch is how it starts slow and methodical when we're only aware of Odysseus, but immediately after,
Do what I say and you'll see them again. Yes, sir!
It picks up the pace. We're now aware of the others being present, so the ante increases, and it also gives a glimpse into the incoming battle, so I don't think it's a coincidence that the pace is essentially just a low-carb version of it. Before the battle, though, we get a great moment of the soldiers showing their faith in Odysseus in this moment, joining in with chants? I don't know, man, the between lines, but also them repeating a line immediately after he finishes it off. They have history with Odysseus, knowing him for at least the last 10 years of war, but they're likely hearing these lines for the first time. I think them immediately picking up what he's saying shows full trust that he knows what to do, giving a glimpse into who he is early into the musical, a man that's trusted to lead and often pays that off. I do wish that the other soldiers' do was a little bit louder or mixed to be more prevalent to make up for the instruments being quieter, especially since they're vocals themselves and quite a lot of people. But outside of that, it's just a really good beginning to it all. We're not quite finished though, as the music shifts focus right back into Odysseus in an isolated moment, as he tells us up front he fights for him and his family. While it's louder than the opening, I feel that's more of an outburst of emotions to show how much he loves his family, rather than a way to bring everyone in. It's actually something I'm going to talk about a little during the observation section of the video, but that's for later. For now, the soldiers come back in as we prepare for battle, once again repeating,
What do you live for? Penelope.
The music in the background builds little by little, the bulk of the energy coming from the men, but we're focusing on Odysseus as he prepares himself for battle before
Attack!
we're immediately thrown into the Forge of War, an orchestral version of the Dangerous Nearby motif. We'll get into that later, don't worry. Serving as a main backdrop, drums and brass filling the rest, and most of the sounds being from the screams of soldiers and clashing of metal. It's kind of crazy that most of the battle's volume is carried by the last two, but it makes sense. There's no room for art in war, unless it's painted with the blood of friends and foes. For the first half as a whole, while the instruments lack the oomph that I love ever so much, it's still a very strong and impactful opening that gets you immediately into the musical. Most of the strength, however, does come from the vocals, which is true for the entire musical really, but especially so for the second half of the song. The instruments aren't as present within the second half by design. The vocals of Luke Holt brings it into a much more commanding and... I hate that I'm saying this in the context that they're voicing Zeus, but intimate presence. I think I need a shower. No, not coins!
You've got mail.
Like I said, the instruments take a backseat during this portion, as we're not focused on the world surrounding Odysseus. The giant battle occurring just outside of our vision isn't important right now. Right now, it's the back and forth between a mortal and a god. The music cuts out as we hear Odysseus get attacked. At the same time, that thunder in a deep synthetic tuba, I think, fills the void left over. A few seconds of silence fills the air as Odysseus finally gets his breath back, asking,
Who was that?
letting us know it probably wasn't a real attack. Before we're able to speculate on this, everything is interrupted with an eagle using a hawk screech in the year of our Lord 2025. Like, oh, we actually God abandoned us a long time ago, so this makes sense. Anyways, everything is interrupted with an eagle's cry piercing the tension, allowing the true threat of the story to answer. It's Zeus. It's always Zeus. We're dealing with Greek mythology here. Did you really think it would be anyone else?
A vision
Zeus starts speaking, and everything changes. No battle, only an enemy that
can only be dealt with right here and now.
Tell me how.
I don't think you're ready.
The tension builds up once again as we learn a little more, with Zeus teasing it to be
A foe won't run, unlike anyone you have faced before.
a deliberate attempt to get Odysseus even more excited for a fight, before eventually revealing that the enemy is just
It's just an infant. It's just a boy. What sort of imminent threat does he pose that I cannot avoid?
a child that will grow and seek revenge as a result of this day. One who will avenge his father and bring suffering to those who dared to assault his city. One who will stop at nothing to bring his enemies to their knees, chasing them to the ends of the earth. And for Odysseus, he'll target his entire reason of being.
Save you can say goodbye to.
Penelope.
You can say goodbye to.
Penelope. I could raise him as my own.
Odysseus in desperation begins negotiating, as he knows what he's being asked. He'll raise the child, he'll isolate him from the world.
Make sure his bastards never know.
He'd even give up his own life if it just meant that at the end of the day he didn't have to
Make it
live.
sweet.
Will of the gods.
Please don't make me do this. Don't make me do this.
The blood on your hands is something you won't lose. All you can choose is whose.
While the instruments lack power, the song is still extremely powerful, and a great hook into the story, being more akin to a black hole rather than a simple lure. The techniques earlier in the song are used once again. The moment between Odysseus and the infant is slow, quiet, and borderline horrifying, as both him and the audience are realizing what's being asked. all of this is overwhelmed with the presence of Zeus, a figure larger than everything else, filling the same spot as the soldiers, as he reveals that yes, the enemy is just an infant. It then becomes quiet once more, as we hear Penelope's name and leitmotif repeated once again, right before a more personal battle breaks out between the two. Odysseus is just a man, but he's begging with everything that he's got. But nothing he could do could ever make a difference to a god, especially one as powerful as Zeus. This dynamic and difference of power is shown with multiple elements of the vocals alone. Odysseus is having to yell to communicate with Zeus, while Zeus himself is simply speaking, having a reverb showing that his voice travels past Oceanus. Zeus is probably filling the entire sky in this moment, while Odysseus doesn't even fill a doorway. This entire moment shows us more of who Odysseus is. A man who wants to protect his family, but has morals that could prevent him from doing so. But the most important thing, at the end of it all, he's just a man. He has no power here. I unfortunately haven't read the Iliad, and have only even read 18 and a bit books of the Odyssey. So I don't know if there's any particular reason for why Zeus is the one revealing all of this information. Though with the added context of future songs, not to mention the lines, "A foe who won't run, unlike anyone you have faced before," seemingly used to arouse pride and excitement within Odysseus. I can't help but wonder if Zeus is just treating this all as a game, a simple piece of entertainment to pass the time. I thought that maybe Zeus preferred Hector and the Trojans in the war, so maybe this was his way of getting back at Odysseus, having been the one to cause the war to start and the reason it ended. But from what little I saw to see if this was the case, it didn't really indicate as such. He talked about Hector after his death in essentially the same way that he does Odysseus at the beginning of the Odyssey, one who gave them many sacrifices and was always pious. Regardless, so far we see a little bit of a sadistic edge to the Thunderbringer, but that's all for stuff in the character analysis section of the video. For now, we should probably talk about... The eagle screech is a hawk's. An eagle cry isn't even that bad. I mean, listen to it. If it not sounding commanding enough is that bad, then you could have just added a few filters to make it as such. Not only that, but you missed out on the perfect opportunity to have it cry Zeus's leitmotif. Jorge himself stated that he went through the effort to ensure that the Waves and Poseidon's songs were as the same tempo of the song. So I can't imagine that an eagle cry would have been that much different. Also, yeah, the missed potential in songs is also something that I'm looking at. And there's one that definitely comes to mind, but there for another day. Now, I will give leeway in that maybe it wouldn't have sounded good, and maybe Jorge did actually try it at some point, but evidently I don't know if that's actually the case. The only other things that I really have to nitpick, unless I discover more to add in later, is the voice acting can be kind of off, or just not enough compared to what I think is trying to be expressed. Starting off with... Who was that? Odysseus only just got his breath back, and it feels like it didn't really happen. Not only that, but he's probably been fighting, or at least running, so surely there'd be a bit more of a struggle to get the words out? Just a small thing for this line that felt off.
Tell me how.
The delivery and the line just sounds off. I think the line may be a bit too loud compared to what's supposed to be an overwhelming presence, at least to start the encounter. It just seems like we're immediately to assume that the two are equal when that's never the case. That itself is overshadowed by the fact that I can't really tell what emotion is supposed to be conveyed in this moment. Like, is it confusion? Concern? Awestruck? Arousal? A mix of them all? Maybe it's apprehensive determination. Like his confidence with the Trojan horse scheme, seemingly working so far in the battle, has been kneecapped with the appearance of a god, and it being Zeus himself probably only makes that worse. I mean, Odysseus definitely knows it's Zeus in this moment. The 10 years of war that had divine intervention many times, not to mention Athena, daughter of Zeus, being his mentor, or just the simple fact that he's a king and a Greek hero in a world that's built around the gods, essentially. Maybe instead it's a mix of the human and monster version of Odysseus. From what I can tell, the two sides are represented with the voice, representing human versus monster, similar to the guitar showing emotional versus cunning. I think the human side is shown with the higher pitch and vice versa with the monstrous side. I think the vocal registers he sings with also play a factor, but I don't have enough experience to just pick out what vocal range he sings in by ear. At least not with full confidence. This is going to be a small side thing, but it'll be quick, I swear. From what I understand, the vocal registers are basically the tuning of your voice that you can do on the fly. They're based on the vibration patterns of your vocal cords, like the strings on a guitar, but the main thing to know is that the actual registers are dependent on testosterone. The more testosterone you have, the deeper your voice, due to the cords becoming thicker and the laryngeal cartilage growing, which by proxy changes the registers for you. For high testosterone registers, from highest to lowest, it's falsetto, head, and chest, but for low testosterone registers, it's head, mixed, and chest. Now, I'm going to be talking about Jorge's voice in the second camp, as his voice itself is essentially a mixed register as is. The mixed register is exactly as it sounds, a mix between the head and the chest. I believe mainly used to limit strain on the vocal cords by going up, or to try to project more by going down. So I think he's going up and down just within the mixed register most of the time. Likely a 50-50 mix.
Alright, my brothers, listen closely.
Up to a head dominant mix.
But now we'll be the ones who slay.
During the final moments leading to the battle where he uses a chest dominant mix.
Penelope, Telemachus, I'm on my way.
But in the moment with the infant, I believe he's using a head register?
It's just an infant. It's just a boy.
And as for the best example for the chest register off the top of my head,
I have had enough.
Evidently, his most monstrous moments. Basically, the vocal register can influence the pitch, but it's kind of its own thing that could have its own implications. Anyways, I suppose it being a mix between human and monster is a possibility, with Odysseus favoring more of a monstrous edge due to the battle, but upon seeing Zeus, he retreats towards being a scared man and certain of what the future holds. I mean, he was literally just attacked by a vision, and is being directly addressed by Zeus, so it would make sense. The problem is that, again, I can't tell what emotion is even being portrayed here. The mix between human and monster is fine, but that's only the foundation of how you say a line. And to me, there just isn't enough of a building on top to give a hint at what emotion is being portrayed. Maybe that's the point of it, to be vague and uncertain, a line to mimic Odysseus' likely thoughts in the moment. But I feel like I should feel that through the conveyed emotion rather than the confusion on what emotion it is. It's like a soundtrack just having a bunch of random notes to indicate confusion, rather than playing a motif that's been set up to indicate a mystery. Maybe some people would say that it's weird to have a motif for just mystery, but like, it depends on the story. If it's a mystery story, shut up. It also being sandwiched between the great voice acting by Luke doesn't make it any better, really. It just pulls you out ever so slightly of a song that's been building perfectly up to this point, which is really unfortunate. The more unfortunate part is that there are 4 other lines that I want to talk about. Like I said, I hold voice acting in high regard, and I already know that the video is going to be really long, so I might as well be thorough.
Say no more. I know that I'm ready.
This one is less about the delivery and more the editing for it.
Say no more.
Is shouted towards Zeus, again due to the circumstances of mortal talking to a god, and
I know that I'm ready.
Is sung quietly, likely Odysseus talking to himself, though the fact that Zeus answers tells us he doesn't need to yell. The problem I have is that the mixing, a filter, or something in the editing makes it sound like the second line is noticeably a little louder. It's not really noticeable unless you're looking for it, but it's still a small blemish. It being 2 different takes as well doesn't really help either, as you can slightly hear the cut between them. If it was 1 take, the 2 lines likely would have transitioned into each other smoother, possibly even making the volume make sense a bit. I can also imagine the volume difference working if, in an animated version, the camera is right in front of Odysseus where he's facing away during
Say no more.
But then turns and faces the camera for
I know that I'm ready.
But there isn't an animated version yet, and I doubt they'd even do that considering, who cares. Regardless, I just consider this to be a byproduct of production. But at the same time, could it not have just been re-recorded or edited a little bit differently? I don't know, maybe it's just me having OCD or something.
It's just an infant. It's just a boy. What sort of imminent threat does he pose that I cannot avoid?
Honestly, these 3 lines with the infant feels like it's not enough, or too on the fence for the circumstances, particularly the last line. I mean, if I found out that there's an extremely dangerous enemy that I can't escape, but can only deal with here and now, and all of this is being told to be by Zeus himself, I think I'd be a tad bit more confused or downright horrified at the connotations upon discovering they're just an infant. Especially considering that Odysseus' whole thing is when does a man become a monster? And, oh, I guess spoiler alert for just a man. Well, you probably already knew that. It just feels like Odysseus says everything a bit too calmly considering that. The first two lines are fine in terms of delivery, it's confusion expressed correctly. I think the last line though is when Odysseus is starting to realize what Zeus is telling him to do, so the voice acting should reflect that. Like I mentioned, I think there's two potential ways of conveying this. The first is with more horror. It's technically an option, but I think the horror likely doesn't set in until where Odysseus realizes how powerless he is to change this. Plus, Odysseus immediately starts negotiating with Zeus, which becomes more like begging as the fear builds up. I think the second option of adding a bit more confusion adds quite a bit, namely by taking away. Again, this is probably where the dots are connecting for Odysseus, but maybe he isn't sure, so questions would be filling his head. Surely I'm mistaken, and there's someone else hidden in this room. But what if it's the infant? Please don't tell me that I have to do what I think I do. Whatever he can in order to say that he's wrong, when he's not. Maybe this helps lead into Odysseus slipping off singing a little bit to extenuate the gravity of the situation. I don't mean to go full Les Mis adaptation to stop the flow, but just make Odysseus lose his tempo for a second to show that his mind is racing. It's little details like that that give the audience a better understanding of the character. Leaving it open to interpretation is fine, but vagueness should be saved for later when the mixing of human and monster is a much more prominent factor to the events of the story. This is where you set up the characters so they can be broken down later. I'm actually going to talk about this a bit more during the observation and headcanon section of the video, because I actually have a decent bit to say about this. Also, I will say there is the potential argument that it's just a slightly muted reaction as a result of 10 years of war wearing down his psyche. But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a soldier who'd point a gun at an infant's skull and pull the trigger without a problem. Yes, war is hell, but that doesn't mean we belong there. This one just feels like it should have more force behind it. It has the hints of Zeus being annoyed, but not enough to actually feel it, which is the entire point of music and a soundtrack.
Please don't make me do this! Don't make me do this!
Similar to the previous line, I feel like it's a bit too focused on the singing rather than the voice acting. And if there was any moment to cut back on the singing, it would be here. Personally, I think it should have been a bit more of a desperate cry. More bits of characterization for Odysseus, and would just make the line hit that much harder. I'm actually going to talk about this in general in the observation section, again, but that's not for a little while. And that's actually about everything for the negatives. Some people may consider it to just be nitpicks, and while that may be the case for this song, it won't always be the case. Besides, I did tell you what I value, and I nitpick these things because it's what I would do with my own works. Plus, it just shows how fundamentally sound the song is that I have to nitpick things that irk me personally just to have anything in the negative section of the video. I think it's about time we moved on to the next section though, so we'll get into the lyrics themselves. I ran out of water in my first 64-ounce jug, so I had to switch to a 64-ounce bottle. Yeah, 64 ounces. Shut up. I drink a lot of water, alright?
The Geneva Convention, more like a suggestion.
There were like 6 separate things that I talked about in the negatives. There were like 39 in this section. Let's get started. Starting with the first 8 lines. Yeah, we're gonna do this line by line. The first 8 lines appear to line up with the musical itself if you actually split them up into 5 songs each.
Alright, my brothers, listen closely.
Is the Troy Saga. It's starting at a time of war where camaraderie and fighting as one would be vital, aka brotherhood. Not only that, but like I mentioned, it's the establishing saga for the entire musical, which means what it's setting up is vital to the rest, so you're gonna want to listen close. That, alongside the lessons other characters are teaching to Odysseus through it, to have open arms, being a warrior of the mind, even the struggles of the crew that Eurylochus presents in Full Speed Ahead, and of course the entire interaction between Odysseus and Zeus. All of these have their own implications on the story at large, so you better listen close.
Tonight we make the Trojans pay.
Would be the Cyclops Saga in Storm. Just replace Trojans with Odysseus and his crew. They suffer the losses of their friends to Polyphemus, with Odysseus being punished for leaving him alive, with a storm preventing safe travels back home.
10 years of war, they killed us slowly.
Would be Luck Runs Out to Wouldn't You Like. The camaraderie between Odysseus and his crew is whittled down more and more. The figurative death between Odysseus and Eurylochus and luck runs out, then results in the literal death of many in ruthlessness. It continues past that, with Odysseus and Eurylochus growing further apart in puppeteer. The questioning of Odysseus' decision to try and save the men is valid, but something that Odysseus refuses to budge on, even if he doesn't really have a plan. He just knows that he can't afford to lose more men. The only question is, who would he be paying that price to?
But now we'll be the ones who slay.
Would be done for to monster. As this portion of the musical progresses, it leads more and more into the death of Odysseus as he is. This series of events is pivotal. The kind and gentle Odysseus being thrown aside for the sake of making it back home. At least that's what Odysseus thinks, as he's the one who tries to kill this version of himself. Regardless, for a very long time, as a result of these songs, he will be the coroner to many.
Think of your wives and your children.
Would be the entirety of the Thunder Saga. The entire saga's focus point is that of Penelope and Telemachus, and to a certain degree, for a while, the families of the crew, like Cydamine for Eurylochus. The siren disguises themselves as Penelope in Suffering and Different Beast, and in the latter, Odysseus showing that he's doing everything that he can to get back home. This is only exemplified by Scylla, as he accepts the fate of his men, even if it emotionally destroys them. As far as he knows, it must be done. The lives of the few for the lives of the many. Mutiny just shows how desperate he really is to get back home. Specifically with the line,
"Don't make me fight you, brother. You know you'd have done the same."
but also how much he still wants many of his men to survive. He doesn't wish to return home with nothing but blood remaining from his crew. His wish will not be granted. Zeus makes Odysseus choose between himself and his crew, with the decision all hinging on Penelope.
Your families wonder where you've been.
Is the entire wisdom saga. Of course, we now get the first songs in Ithaca, showing that Penelope has stayed loyal all this time, even with the uncertainty of Odysseus' location and fate, and that Telemachus looks up to his father despite never personally knowing him. We also learn that Athena too wonders where Odysseus is, leading to love in paradise in Calypso, someone who Odysseus appears to love like a daughter as well. And of course, there's the massive disagreement, argument, and fight that occurs in God games, where even there they stick together, in a way.
They're growing old and yet you're still here.
Would be the Vengeance Saga. Obviously, after 20 years, Penelope and Telemachus have grown and lived without Odysseus. But Penelope is still loyal. Telemachus still holds hope that Odysseus will return someday, and Odysseus eventually returning to fill that void. For Odysseus, however, that
Yet you're still here.
part instead plays on the mental strain and conflict that he goes through. To him, Odie died a long time ago, and all that remains is Odysseus. And of course, the fact that he's been trapped on an island for 7 years.
Do what I say and you'll see them again.
Is the Ithaca saga. Now we finally reach the end where Odysseus finally reaches Ithaca. The only one who survived everything over the past 20 years. The only one who listened to himself is the only one that gets to see his family again. Of course, he would have to deal with the suitors beforehand, and the borderline mental breakdown and would you fall in love with me again? But I mean, they're right there, so, it still counts.
Diomedes will lead the charge.
This entire section is what I meant when talking about the lyrical flow earlier, but I digress. Diomedes actually made it back home safely in just 4 days according to the Odyssey, Book 3, but due to varying reasons after the fact, he wouldn't be allowed back into Argos and instead went to Italy where he'd eventually die or become immortal, again, depending on who you ask. There are other versions where he does struggle getting back, but again, the Odyssey Book 3 itself states, "It was the 4th day, when in Argos, the company of Diomedes, son of Tydeus, tamer of horses, stayed their shapely ships." I'll take Homer's words over the rest for the situation.
Agamemnon will flank the guards.
Agamemnon would be killed upon returning home by his wife Clytemnestra and his cousin Aegisthus, who Clytemnestra cheated on him with and would eventually marry. The main reason I bring this up is because in the Odyssey, the story of Agamemnon's son, Orestes, avenging his father is brought up multiple times for various reasons. Athena would use it to try and motivate Telemachus in the beginning. Nestor talks about it during Telemachus' visit, and Menelaus reveals that he learned of it from a god while trapped on an island a few weeks and nearly starving to death. Wait a minute. I just wanted to bring it up because it's actually a decent attempt by Homer to add tension to the Odyssey. Hell, Odysseus spent 7 years on Ogygia, the same length of time between Agamemnon's murder and Orestes' vengeance. You see parallels between the two and don't know if Odysseus is actually going to survive considering the tendency for characters to be killed off out of nowhere in Greek mythology. Anyways, the only other thing to mention really is that
Menelaus will let our mates through the gates to take the whole city at large.
and is also Agamemnon's brother. Obviously, I kinda spoiled that he survives, but like, it's Hellenistic age Greek mythology. It's been over 2,500 years. It's gonna be okay. He actually kinda goes through his own sort of odyssey, being trapped in Egypt on an island and only escaping after a god assists him. It kind of feels like Homer thought of a bunch of things for Odysseus to go through, but then realized he would have to write about all of them, so he just decided to stick him on adhd for 7 years. Which, 1, based, 2, coward, and 3, yes, I did pronounce Calypso's island in 2 different ways, because I have no idea how to pronounce it, so I'm playing both sides.
Teucer will shoot any ambush attack.
I know literally nothing about Teucer. Hold on. Huh. Okay, so his half-brother Ajax the Greater would commit Sudoku because he didn't win Achilles' magical suit of armor in a debate against Odysseus, who had the aid of Athena. He was essentially playing the equivalent of an ancient verbal crane game. Rigged the shit, essentially. Other versions outside of the Iliad claim instead that he killed a bunch of livestock out of rage or due to a spell from Athena, possibly assuming that they were his fellow soldiers, but upon realizing that they were livestock, he would commit seppuku. Teucer himself would actually be disowned by his father because he failed, quote-unquote, to bring back Ajax's body, weaponry, and armor after his death. But, honestly, I don't even blame him. Granted, it was magical, but like, you're Ajax the Greater. You don't need it. Just go out there, fight. You'll probably win 90% of the time. And in that one time, well, you lost against yourself. So look at who's laughing now.
Little Ajax will stay back.
I'm not going to talk about Ajax the Lesser too much, as he's important to some headcanons later, but just know that he died without dignity. His ship was struck by lightning from Athena, causing him and his men to climb on top of a rock with assistance from Poseidon. But then he went, "I'll survive despite the gods." Then Poseidon went bet and split the rock with his trident, causing Ajax to drown. Do not mourn him. It was 100% deserved. But a very interesting story for something later on. Just know that there's a reason Odysseus wanted him to stay back.
Nestor, secure Helen and protect her.
If you weren't paying attention earlier, Nestor was the other Greek hero that Telemachus visits during the Odyssey before visiting Menelaus. The only thing of note is that he's really old but barks like a chihuahua on Adderall. I guess I could also mention that Apollo supposedly gave him the years that he took from his mother Chloris and his uncles as an apology, so he essentially lived for generations. I don't know whether to imagine him as like a 110-year-old monk or a 110-year-old D&D monk that's built like a twig but would destroy you in combat. Or maybe he's not built like a twig. It is D&D, so it's always possible. He's extremely buff, but he's got like a strength rating of 7. If even. Now, I'm assuming that the reason he's escorting Helen is so that the others would do the fighting, considering that he was already too old for combat by the time that the Iliad rolled around. I believe somewhere I saw that instead he just rode around on a chariot instead of actually getting into battle, so that's probably what inspired that line.
Neo, avenge your father, kill the brothers of Hector.
Neo, or Neoptolemus, is the son of Achilles. He's only mentioned once in the Iliad, I believe, in Book 19. He was prophesied to be important in the Greeks' victory of the war, thus Odysseus himself actually revealed him from Skyros and brought him to the battle. He's essentially the opposite of Nestor, being only a teen when brought into the Trojan War, though some versions say that he was a young adult, somewhere in that range.
Find that inner strength now, use that well of pride, fight through every pain now.
Obviously, something that Odysseus will have to do multiple times throughout the musical himself, the strength to continue despite the pain, but of course, hubris being his biggest folly for a very long time, though itself potentially providing a source of fuel to keep going. The main reason I bring this up is in combination with the next one.
What do you live for? What do you try for? What do you wish for? What do you fight for?
I'm honestly a bit surprised these two segments aren't used anywhere else in the future as a motif, at least from what I remember. They're basically a call to try and motivate his men, so I wouldn't be surprised if Odysseus was thinking of these lines in his most stressful times, and the music could reflect that. I will say though, there is a leitmotif that does kind of fit the function of what this one would. If there was any place that they would best fit though, it would probably be during Storm and Charybdis, and only as a subtle melody in the background. Melody? Is that the right word? I'm not entirely sure. Typically in moments where there's no vocals. Dangerous could also technically have it, but the only real good section for it would probably be Odysseus's
Don't you know that danger is my friend?
part. So, it's kind of hard to fit it in there.
I fight for us! I fight for us!
This heavily implies that he fights for just his family, but the repeating of the line could also indicate a change of meaning to include his men as well. It would still indicate that his family takes priority, but adding his men to the equation would add depth to his character and to the story. The lines are in transition between the briefing and the ambush, which is why I still think it's possible that the line changes. We probably won't have a definitive call on this until the official visual form were to come though.
What do you live for? Penelope.
He lives for Penelope.
What do you try for? Telemachus.
He tries for Telemachus.
What do you wish for? I'm on my way.
He wishes to go home.
What do you fight for? Attack!
And this is where it gets interesting, because it can be interpreted in different ways. Does he fight for the sake of attacking? Fighting as a soldier was expected of men in ancient Greece, and there's also the fact that they're attacking Troy rather than defending anything. If it follows the same pattern as the rest of the verse, maybe it implies he doesn't question why he fights at all. Like, the answer could be so obvious he doesn't need to state it again, as he's already did so multiple times before it. Or maybe searching for the answer is too painful for him. Or maybe he already knows the answer, and it brings him shame. Especially if the answer is that he fights for himself. Or maybe it shows something deeper within Odysseus, and tells us what type of soul he has. One that never gives in. He gives up, but never gives in. Maybe he doesn't answer the question because there is no answer with a soul like that. You can state plausible reasons as to why you fight, but no matter what, it would just never let you give in, even if you had every reason to do so. It's not a soul that you just know you have. It's one that only shows its face whenever it's necessary. There's a lot of interpretations for this line alone, considering the context, but I feel like the actual interpretation depends on the rest of the musical, so we'll just move on for now. Eagles are typically associated with Zeus in Greek mythology, for reasons I'll get into later during the observation section, but in the Odyssey, there are two occurrences in which Athena turns into an eagle. I'm not sure about the Iliad since I've never read it, but even one of these two instances is enough for a devilish little detail. I imagine, this is a bit of a headcanon, so apologies, but I imagine that when Odysseus asked who was that, when he hears the eagle, he assumes it's Athena and looks up with hope, only to lose it all when he sees Zeus staring back at him. I specifically imagine the eagle is a black eagle, but again, I'll talk about that later.
A vision of what is to come cannot be outrun.
This implies that Odysseus would be targeted by Hector's son, Astyanax, but Achilles was the one who killed Hector, so there would be some other reason for this targeting. He could likely just be one target among many for his part in the war, especially the two most important parts of it, its end and its beginning. Helen is the wife of Menelaus of Sparta, but was taken to Troy after being seduced or kidnapped, depending on who you ask, by Prince Paris of Troy. Menelaus would then invoke the oath that the suitors of Helen made when they were competing for her hand in marriage. That oath being that they'd have to come to the winning suitor's aid if Helen were to ever be in danger. The reason this is important is because Odysseus was the one who suggested it to Helen's putative father, Tyndareus. When the time actually came to go to war, Odysseus was said to have actually tried faking insanity to avoid going, as a seer had prophesied he wouldn't return for a long time. Palamedes would force Odysseus' hand, though, by putting his infant son Telemachus in danger, either by putting them in front of Odysseus' plow as he was working, or by threatening harm to the child himself. You can definitely see where certain aspects of the musical come from. Odysseus is also often credited for the Greeks' victory as he thought of the Trojan horse. Interestingly, though, in the Odyssey, Odysseus actually says he did it with the aid of Athena. I'll talk about this a bit more in the character observation section.
Can only be dealt with right here and now.
This has some interesting implications in terms of just epic. If this is true, does that mean Odysseus and his crew get home in a decent time frame if he doesn't kill the infant? The weight of killing the infant wouldn't be present, so maybe it doesn't lead to many of the events of epic happening due to a less desperate mentality to get back home. The events with Polyphemus would likely still happen due to them searching for food, but I think details around it would change. Maybe Odysseus isn't as hyper-vigilant as he is in Open Arms, because he's not as scared of losing a single man. His best friend, admittedly, but still. The weight of the infant probably makes him extremely cautious to ensure it isn't a crime committed in vain. So without fear, maybe he brings more than just polities, which may lead to a different encounter with the Lotus Eaters, and possibly no open arms at all. This may result in him not sparing Polyphemus, thus not leading to the entire storm saga. Then, from there, who knows what happens? If there's no storm created by a god, Odysseus may very well get home in less than a month. Maybe Poseidon would still find out eventually, but it's not exactly guaranteed that he'd seek revenge on Odysseus, and even if he did, Odysseus would probably be home already. Regardless of if the events of the story happens or not, if Odysseus doesn't kill Scamandrius now, or Astyanax as he's also known, then what does Odysseus do when he gets home? Does he prepare for the inevitable arrival? Maybe he instead forgets about them since he's not scarred from killing them, so he doesn't keep thinking of the infant from that night. If it still took Odysseus 10 years to get back home, Scamandrius would only be in his early teens at the latest and probably wouldn't start his hunt until his 20s. That's all assuming Scamandrius does actually go after Odysseus in the first place. There are many versions of stories where Scamandrius actually survives the sack of Troy in various manners, but I don't think there's a single one where he tries to get revenge on any of the Greeks. Most of them just have him changing his name and becoming a prominent figure in other places of history, like France or Italy. This is likely just authors trying to prop up these people with the blood of legendary mythical figures such as Hector. So then, if Scamandrius doesn't seek it, then maybe Zeus himself forces Scamandrius to go after Odysseus, or possibly all the Greeks involved in the war. And if so, how? And more importantly, why? Well, let's look at the next verse.
A mission to kill someone's son, a foe who won't run, unlike anyone you have faced before.
This is purposely vague by Zeus. He doesn't reveal that they're just an infant, he just talks them up to get Odysseus more excited for the fight, and to crush him when the reveal comes. Again, why? I mean, why tell him any of this? When Hector died in the Iliad, Zeus actually mentioned he was saddened at the death and the subsequent disrespect to Hector's corpse, so maybe in this universe, Zeus cares a lot more about Hector than what's implied in the Iliad. But then you take into account god games, and it doesn't really make sense. Why would he even allow a game to release Odysseus if he never wanted to let Odysseus go in the first place? Maybe Zeus assumed he'd win, so in a moment of hubris allowed it to occur. Then he had to admit defeat because Athena is Athena. The problem with this all is that it implies Zeus hated Odysseus and the other Greeks. Though that isn't technically wrong. Zeus has many moments of hatred towards humanity for various reasons, such as not wanting them to have fire, so when Prometheus inevitably went behind his back and gave them fire out of love, Zeus would punish him with chains and an eagle to eat out his pancreas forever. Not to mention floods, more gruesome fates, and the entire concept of Hesiod's 5 ages of man. For the 5 ages of man, one age typically ended because Zeus just didn't want them to be alive, essentially. He just kills them. With that in mind, I think maybe it's less of hatred towards these specific characters and more just humanity in general. Zeus is likely using Odysseus' suffering as a form of entertainment, and he's telling them himself because he wants to witness it firsthand. At least that's the current theory. I have no idea why Zeus is the one that did this other than being Zeus. So, Jorge just went with him. But it still has implications in the universe. So that's sort of what I'm trying to explore here.
Say no more, I know that I'm ready.
Going back to Odysseus now, this shows his pride in battle and the excitement for what should be a good fight, like I mentioned.
What sort of imminent threat does he pose that I cannot avoid?
A question answered by Zeus, the true threat of literally everything. Again, it's Zeus. What else do you expect?
Know that he will grow from a boy to an avenger.
The use of the word avenger implies that Scamandrius would be in the right. This does circle back to the why would Zeus do this talk earlier, being another point towards Zeus hitting Odysseus or the Greeks. Or possibly biased towards the Trojans in general, but since I haven't read the Iliad myself, I'll hold off on the assumption.
If you don't end it now, you'll have no one left to save. You can say goodbye to Penelope.
This implies the version that we get is one where Odysseus could have saved people, potentially adding to future guilt if he realized this later, probably while on Ogygia. I'm gonna go with Ogygia, alright, shut up. It obviously also implies that if he doesn't do this, he and his family will be killed by said infant. Of course, Zeus doesn't mention that killing him instead means saying goodbye to Athena.
I could raise him as my own, or send him far away.
Odysseus was immediately willing to raise the child instead of killing him. Zeus says no, and that his house and throne will burn, but it doesn't mention whether it would have been intentional, which is an interesting detail. Odysseus' decision could have also just been influenced by the infant reminding him of his own son, Telemachus, as stated in Just a Man. More desperation from Odysseus, matched with pushback by Zeus, notably not saying how or why once more. Of course, we're dealing with limited time here, but it's still a detail to keep in mind. The wherever you go part, however, does imply that Odysseus is indeed the target, but again, could just be one of many. Odysseus seemingly returns to the idea of raising the child and raising them in ignorance to their true identity. Odysseus and Hector may even look similar enough to make it work, but Zeus finally applies pressure and states that the gods will be involved, most likely meaning just him though. Once again, however, the child's intent or reaction isn't even known. If Scamandrius learned of his past and confronted Odysseus over it, then he'd probably even learn about Odysseus' bargaining and choice to raise them over killing them. There's definitely an interesting story in this alternative universe, but obviously, that's not the one we see. Considering the circumstances, this could be taken as Odysseus stating that he'd give up his life if it meant that he didn't have to kill the infant. Considering later events of the story, that's a very interesting line he wouldn't cross. I'll try to remember this to bring it up when those moments come, because I didn't make note of what I actually meant here. God damn it, pass me, why do you do this?
Down on my knees for ya, I'm begging please.
This is likely in reference to the typical begging position in ancient Greece. You'd be on your knees and wrapping your arms around the legs of whoever you were begging from. I think with your head down as well. I think the idea was that you put your body in an extremely vulnerable position, showing your desperation. I actually thought of a different way of begging that would require the person being begged from to approach the beggar to answer. I'll talk about it more in the animated version ideas video, but know that it's an additional reason for Zeus's anger with the next line.
This is the will of the gods.
Zeus finally gets fed up with Odysseus trying to negotiate, so just outright says the gods, again possibly just him, have made their decision. I can't help but wonder if this had an impact later on Odysseus' and Athena's relationship. He did say gods, so maybe it inflicted some doubt on Odysseus' end on who he could trust.
Please don't make me do this! Don't make me do this!
Odysseus' weakness has finally set in. He has no power here. Again, feel like the delivery should have reflected that better. And lastly,
The blood on your hands is something you won't lose. All you can choose is whose.
outside of just being a really good line, it's obviously the infant versus his family. And crew. Maybe. Another thing I want to mention though, is the use of the word won't instead of can't. It may seem weird, but hear me out. In the Iliad, as well as the Odyssey, I'm pretty sure, instead of saying like, oh, you wanted this, or, you know, you were in want of this, they said you were in want of this. W-O-N-T, without an apostrophe. So in this instance, it could be a little bit of doublespeak, where it's you want to lose the blood on your hands, but you won't. Considering how much fate has a potential impact in the entire story, especially in interpretations of it, it's definitely an interesting little detail. I will talk about fate a lot more in just a man. I'm not going to do it much, if at all, in this video though, because, well, it's already long enough as this. This entire section was literally twice the length of the negatives. This is what I signed up for, I suppose. At least I know the music section won't be as long, considering that I know basically nothing. Right? It's going to be shorter. Right? I'm gonna say it now. I'm going based off of whatever I can hear through the vocals and pure vibes. There is no instrumental version, and the vocals are like twice the volume of the music. So if there's things that I miss, what do you want me to do about that? As for the vibes thing, I don't know a lot about music, but I can at least recognize some patterns from what I do know. I will try to confirm any suspicions I have before talking about them. Plus, I'll try to edit the audio so you know specifically what I'm talking about. I think it's about time that we get sideways. No. Now, this opening note is used later as the opening for Monster in Odysseus. In this instance, it appears to have been made with a mix of string instruments and an electric instrument of some sort. In Monster, it's louder but deeper, with a bit more of an electric instrument coming through. It makes sense considering where Odysseus is mentally in that moment. When it appears once more in Odysseus, it appears that the string instrument is completely gone, leaving only the electric behind. I'm not sure if their uses actually signify something, but if I were to guess, they're likely the 3 most pivotal moments for Odysseus in terms of his mindset, or at least his 3 most unique mindsets. Starting off with someone who just wants to go home, going to someone who's considering ruthlessness, and ending with someone who's had enough. Hey, Editing Steel here. I just wanted to pop in and say that it's also similar to the opening to Scylla, which I'm not entirely sure if it is the same opening or if it just happens to be similar, but I thought I'd at least mention it. It lasts about 6 seconds compared to the other 3 songs, and is also much more toned down with how prevalent it is, which is why I didn't even think of it when I was first writing the script. I think it still works with the Odysseus mindset theory that I mentioned, because in Scylla, Odysseus is sort of letting the reins go. He's not trying to be cunning, he's not trying to be scheming, he's essentially accepting the fate of his men. So it could be a small tinge of a different mindset, but it could also just show that his mindset, the way that he thinks, what he plans on doing, it's not really going to work here. It's not present here. And if it is, it's not the main focus. That sort of thing. From 3 seconds to 19 seconds is the first instance of Odysseus' leitmotif. But it also has elements of the danger is nearby motif. It's not just because it appears for certain as a choir alongside it, I swear. I thought at first it was just a bit of a thematic transformation to make the 2 motifs into one, but I think the danger is nearby motif is just what it was. In fact, I think a lot of motifs actually stem from the danger is nearby motif. Speaking of which, the danger is nearby motif appears 3 times from what I can tell. If you struggle to hear it, just imagine the opening to Ultra Instinct Mastered. First off, it appears from 19 seconds to 33 seconds as a background choir, likely to forebode Odysseus alone. The second appearance is from 37 seconds to 49 seconds, matching the intensity from the reveal of more men, and likely to indicate all of the Greek soldiers together. It appears as some strings that I can't recognize. Violin, maybe? I don't know. Lastly, it appears from 1 minute 30 to 1 minute 47 as more strings during the battle, which could be for the Greek soldiers, Zeus, or both. The most interesting aspect of this entire motif, however, is a potential connection that I kind of stumbled across. I may have just heard the song completely wrong and I'm just hallucinating, but I think it may be an altered version of the Dies Irae. For those of you that don't know, the Dies Irae was a song created way back when, like 7th to 13th century way back, we're not entirely sure, for the Day of Wrath for Jesus Christ. For maybe the first time in 1830, a man named Hector Berlioz, I think, I don't know if that's actually how you pronounce his name, but we'll just go with it, would use it to represent the death of a character. In turn, it would be used by many other composers to represent death in their own works, and as a result, nearly 200 years later, we now associate this melody with death. Now, that may seem crazy, and honestly, I thought so too when I first thought of it, but then I had an idea. Terrifying, I know, but it's actually kind of proven me right. Like, I can't read sheet music, I can't even tell you what notes are being played, but I can sure as hell autism my way to being correct because there are patterns all over the place. I'll show you what I'm talking about real quick. I'm just going to use an online sheet music creator for this, so don't expect the most in-depth analysis here. Not worrying about the actual keys being played, here we have the Dies Irae. And here we have the dangerous approaching motif. Now let's start by moving the entire danger is approaching down 2 whole tones to match the starting position for both pieces. Now Now let's take the third note down a semitone and the fourth note down a whole tone and see what that gets us. Now let's take the fifth note down a half tone and the sixth note down a whole tone. Again, repeating the same moves for the third and fourth. Now let's take the seventh note down a half tone and the last note down 2 whole tones this time, and we get the dies irae. Now, I'll be first to admit and say that I'm not actually certain if I'm correct on this, especially since you could technically make any song sound like another if you try hard enough. But considering that in epic, danger approaching is typically followed with death, not to mention that the first time we hear it is with the thematic transformation to include Odysseus' motif, who obviously is surrounded by death, I would be inclined to say I'm wrong if it didn't fit the story being told. But if the shoe fits, you might as well wear it. I did it sideways. Yeah, I'm proud of that, so what? I just never thought it was a possibility, let alone in the first video. I'm now out of my second 64-ounce bottle. I'll be right back. Alright, moving on now. There are these 2 notes in the background from 51 seconds to 106. I think they're strings, but I'll add a filter or 2 so it's easier to hear.
Yes, sir. Find that inner strength now. Use that well of pride. Fight through every pain now. Ask yourself inside.
Now these 2 notes actually appear to be a leitmotif, but it's hard to pick out in other songs due to its similarity with the Danger is Nearby motif, as well as Odysseus' leitmotif, which was probably intentional. Plus, it's hard to pick out behind vocals and whatnot, but I think it appears in many songs. I'm not going to play them all, because I'll just point them out when we get to those songs, especially since there might be multiple uses of it. Anyways, the songs that I think it's in is Full Speed Ahead, Storm, Keep Your Friends Close, The Underworld, Scylla, Thunderbringer, We'll Be Fine, Love in Paradise, God Games, maybe Not Sorry for Loving You, maybe Charybdis as well, Get in the Water, also maybe 600 Strike, The Challenge, I Can't Help But Wonder, and Would You Fall in Love With Me Again. Now to anyone who's listened to the musical before, some of them may stand out to you. Some may even know what I'm talking about. This leitmotif is what I alluded to when talking about
Find that inner strength now.
And
What you live for.
with that first verse, possibly even mimicking it. This leitmotif appears mostly as instruments in the background, but there's 4 times where it's actually said with words. Once where it's said with words that don't actually match it, but 3 times where it's explicit. The reason these 2 verses don't have a motif of their own is because Odysseus already has one that he uses as motivation. He doesn't need a different motif because his family waiting for his return is enough to keep him going. It says a lot about how much faith he has in his family to do so, but much more about his family that they have said trust, particularly I mention it possibly being similar to the Danger is Nearby motif on purpose, and that's exactly why. Because it's going to be dangerous to get back to those who are waiting. It's 2 sides of the same damn coin. It's hatred compared to love. It's despair compared to hope. It's death compared to life. It's ruthlessness compared to mercy. I'll try to talk about each use when we get to those songs I think they're in, but there's a possibility that it may appear more than the Danger is Nearby motif through the entire musical. And I think that says enough by itself. Now from 1:07 to 1:14, we get the first use of Penelope's leitmotif.
Penelope, Penelope.
And of course, it appears later from 3:07 to 3:14.
Penelope,
You can say goodbye to it.
Penelope. I could raise him up.
Now, I'm not sure if that timing was on purpose, but if not, it's a nice little coincidence. If anything, Jorge probably saw that it nearly lined up and moved around the timing of events to make it work. It was likely somewhere between Odysseus being attacked and Zeus's first line that would have happened. Now next, it sounds like he says Telemachus like the Danger is Nearby motif from 1:15 to 1:17. Now I'm not 100% certain of it, but if that's the case, it's a nice little nod to Telemachus himself becoming capable later in the story. I think it's more likely to be the waiting motif though, considering 1, he's family, but 2, The first note for the first syllable is lower, much like it subtly is in the challenge. It rises before the more recognizable portion of it. And I don't think the dangerous nearby motif ever really has that, so... Hey, editing Steel here. I don't know what the hell I was on with the waiting thing for the challenge. I've listened to it many times. Not once does it sound like it's rising. I don't know what I was on that day when I thought that it did, but just wanted to pop in and say, that's not a thing. The part about him still being family, I think it's more the waiting motif than the dangerous approaching, or dangerous nearby motif, rather. Granted, they're both the same thing, but whatever. I just wanted to make sure you knew I was stupid. I mean, I still am, but I was especially so in that moment. So, yeah, apologies about that. Also, during this moment, there's this ethereal choir sounding thing that I know was definitely in Thunderbringer. I think the electric guitar from a minute 23 to a minute 30 is an altered version of Odysseus' motif, specifically to represent combat, or maybe a better term would be conflict.
Penelope.
What do you try for?
Telemachus.
What do you wish for?
I'm on my way.
What do you fight for?
It appears for certain in Survive from a minute 59 to 211. As well as in the Underworld as a piano from 110 to 129.
When does a man become a monster?
Now, I did check a lot of songs, but I only went to the Underworld saga because, well, there's quite a few that I think it appears, but I'm not entirely sure, really. Like in Remember Them, the deep electric guitar thing, maybe? I'm not entirely sure. From 9 seconds to 38 seconds. I think that might be it, but it's so deep and it's drowned out by the rest that it's kind of hard to tell. Then maybe in Ruthlessness as a higher pitched electric guitar and the piano from 25 seconds to 218. Then there's There Are Other Ways, and I think it's there as a cello from 2 seconds to a minute 03. Then a minute 51 to 212. And then 235 to 251. And then also maybe in the Underworld itself as a piano from a minute 10 to a minute 29. And then I think it might be the entire bass for the opening of No Longer You. As in, like, it's slowed down, technically, where the notes are just, they have more space in between them, that sort of thing. And then maybe it's the weird, like, wood/clicking sound in Monster. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I really like the sound, so there's that. But I don't know if that's actually the version I'm thinking of. There's a lot of, I think, maybe, but I don't know. It definitely appears in other moments, though, not just in this song, because obviously you survive in the Underworld. But I'll just probably have to wait until we actually get to those songs for me to be able to confirm them, because that would be a lot of time in editing in order to try to verify it, because I would have to test everything out in order to actually do that. I just don't have the time for that right now, though, so... It's maybe in those songs, and that's only half of the musical. I'm sure it's in other places, though. From a minute 47 to 226, and a second instance from 251 to 307, there's this deep synthetic sound that I can't quite make out. Now, I don't remember it ever appearing anywhere else, but I may be mistaken about that. I can't even really make out the notes, so I can't even, like, mimic it for you. It might honestly just be a unique element for this song, which wouldn't be surprising. I'm sure every song has something like this. If anyone else knows where it appears, let me know, because evidently I have no idea. Speaking of unique elements, I think the choir from 211 to 227 is only in this song.
To kill someone's son, a foe won't run, unlike anyone you have faced before.
Say no more. I know that. I'm ready. I don't think you're ready.
It's only 4 notes and higher pitched, but I don't recall hearing it anywhere else. Also, yes, I do search for each instance rather than going off of my memory. The section is shorter for you, but it's probably the longest for me in terms of getting anything actually written down. Now, the infant's mobile thing I don't know, the thing from 227 to 230. It kind of sounds like a less detailed version of Telemachus' motif. I could be completely wrong, but if it is indeed his motif, then it being simplified makes sense. The version of the motif we hear in the musical is when he's about 20 years old, but the only memory Odysseus has of Telemachus was that of an infant. His entire perception and connection with his son is weak at its best as a result. So, of course, the motif would be a simple and less detailed version, because who it's for is distant and not well known to Odysseus, outside of a few months maybe that he got with an infant. Discordance due to age and disconnect. That's, again, assuming that that is actually the case with this. I have no idea. I could just be losing my mind. I'm making a 3-hour video on a single song. I'm definitely losing my mind. From 236 to 305, there's this string melody that starts with the infant's song. And I think it's also unique to the horse and the infant, because I don't recall it being anywhere else.
Infant, it's just a boy. What sort of image does he pose in a cannot boy?
This is the son of none other than Troy's very own Prince Hector. Know that he will grow from a boy to an avenger. One thing with rage has consumed by age.
Now Zeus's background vocals during the confrontation appear to always be Odysseus rather than anyone else from the cast, which is how it typically would be with anyone else. This is an important detail for later.
I don't think you're ready. If you don't end it now, you'll have no one left to save. Penelope. You can say goodbye. Penelope.
I could raise him.
All you can choose is who's.
And finally, there's strings in the background during their confrontation that I can't quite make out at all, because it's really loud. But I think it may just be to accentuate the moment by mimicking it.
Or sending far away to make sure it's fast and snap.
I wish I could give you all more information, but my knowledge is already quite limited, and it's not helped by there being no instrumental versions. Please hurry, please, it would really help. Honestly, with this section, I can just only hope to point out things that you may not know. Really, that's it. But now it's probably time to move on to the character analysis. I just drank that entire bottle of water. Alright, I'm back and I grabbed 4. Hopefully that will last me for the rest of the video. It probably won't.
Now this is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down.
Now luckily there's only 2 characters in this song really, so that's all we're going to focus on for now. Of course there is also the crew, like I mentioned, possibly having a lot of faith in Odysseus, but that's a lot of people that may or may not appear for the rest of the, musical, so we'll just skip past them. First up, we have Odysseus. The first thing that we get hints of is his charisma, as he's the one chosen to brief some of the greatest Greek soldiers to ever exist. This could also just be due to being credited with the creator of the scheme of the Trojan horse, but the plan has to be explained well enough for people to get it, and considering the huge chance that he gets, I think it's safe to say that he's got the charisma anyways. His cunning is up next, as we know of the Trojan horse, but like I mentioned before, it was likely a brainchild between Odysseus and Athena. In the Odyssey, it was mentioned multiple times. Once by Menelaus in Book 4, who mentioned nothing of its creator, and once by Odysseus himself in Book 8, while he was disguised. But come now, change thy theme, and sing of the building of the horse of wood, which Epius made with Athena's help. The horse which once Odysseus led up into the citadel as a thing of guile, when he had filled it with the men who sacked Ilios. The bard that he was speaking to, Demodocus, I think is how you pronounce it, would indeed sing of the wooden horse, but added no information relevant to this. Okay, so in my defense, this was like 3.5 hours into the recording session, 3.5, something like that. And, yeah, okay, I don't know why I said Demodocus. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. I'm pretty sure it's Demodocus, which sounds way more accurate. Because, like, let's be honest here, Demodocus, one of them sounds accurate, one of them sounds Greek, one of them sounds like a fucking dinosaur, so I don't know what the hell I was thinking. I don't speak Greek, okay? Oh, hey, there's my excuse. I don't speak Greek. There we go. In Epic, it's also mentioned twice. Once in Monster with,
Does a soldier use a wooden horse to kill sleeping Trojans 'cause he is vile?
trial? Or does he throw away his remorse and save more lives with God?
And once in God games.
Hides inside a wooden horse to get the job done!
Now the instance in Monster is the closest that we get to an idea for who created it, but it's still not a confirmation. Now Virgil's Aeneid does also mention it in Book 2.
Broken in war and thwarted by the fates, the Danaan chiefs, now that so many years were gliding by, build by Pallas's divine arts a horse of mountainous bulk, and interweave its ribs with planks of fur. They pretend it is an offering for their safe return. This is the rumor that goes abroad. Here, within its dark sides, they stealthily enclose the choicest of their stalwart men, and deep within they fill the huge cavern of the belly with armed soldiery.
I would like to mention though that this was at least 7 centuries after Homer's works, so I would take it with a slight grain of salt. Now, because no one is credited with the idea of the Trojan horse, it's consequently vague within epic itself, but it may have been purposeful in the context of the story. It could indicate that Odysseus didn't want to take credit for something that Athena had thought of, or maybe they had thought of it together and the circumstances of Monster doesn't exactly leave room for memories, including her, to be positive. I don't think it'll even be mentioned in Ilium, considering that the Iliad doesn't even get close to it from what I'm aware, but I can totally imagine a little back and forth between the two towards the end. Like we need a way through. You need a way in, but the walls are thick. Lines can be thin. Catch them off guard. Use their own kin. You need a horse. That's how we'll win. What? A horse, a structure, a vessel for our men, to be brought inside and to strike from within. It's coming, but just a matter of when. We can lie in wait until it's night and then... It needs more. More than that. It needs lore. Lore to get to that door. The door. They'll open up more if we make them think that they've won the war. Again, I doubt it though. Alright, so I'm recording the part of the musical analysis section where Zeus has the backing vocals that sound like Odysseus. And I'm editing this part where I just found out I said recording instead of editing. And I just thought of another theory. This is unscripted, so I apologize if I ramble a bit, but what if Zeus isn't actually here? As in, this is Odysseus's imagination. As in, Odysseus's paranoia. In Greek mythology, there are multiple stories that have Astyanax being killed by one Greek or another, one of them obviously including Odysseus. Though I think in the Iliad it mentions that Andromache predicted Neoptolemus would be the one to do it, but regardless, that's not the version we have here. But the most important thing is that I don't think in any of those stories Zeus is ever a factor. It's always the paranoia that the infant would come back and get vengeance for his family and for his town, or not his town, his polis, his city. What is Odysseus known for? His paranoia, his overthinking, his preparation. Not only that, but in Zeus's portions, he rarely makes mention that Odysseus is the one that would be targeted. I mean, there's a foe he can't outrun, he'll find you wherever you go, that's it. But what is the main crux of the entire conversation about? If you don't end him now, you'll have no one left to save. You can say goodbye to Penelope. He will burn your house and throne. Not only that, but in The Horse and the Infant, Odysseus got struck by, presumably a vision? But what if that vision was just an hallucination? The backing vocals sounding like Odysseus could also just be him reinforcing these ideas. The fact that his family is in danger from an infant that has no chance to grow. The infant could just completely ruin everything that he's done. These past 10 years of war would have been for nothing. He didn't want to be here. He wanted to be at home with his wife and with his son. He would trade the world to see his son and wife. So when they are in potential danger by someone who he sees as a threat, even if they're not one, then what would he do? He would try to ensure their safety. I think if it was just Odysseus that was the one that was in trouble, then maybe he would have been like, I'll be able to deal with him. But when it switched to Penelope, when it switched to his family, when it switched to his home, things changed. When it was a threat that he could only deal with here and now, he was excited. It was a fight. He was ready for it. But it's just an infant. What threat does he pose? Now, not only that, but in Thunderbringer, Zeus is a completely different character. He's egotistical. He's self-centered. He's, look at me. I'm the one that saves the pride, the damsel in distress. He's constantly talking about himself until like halfway through the song. That's Zeus. Egotistical and self-centered. So why the hell, in this moment, would Zeus be benevolent in a sense? Why would he tell Odysseus about something 20 years in the future when it has no bearing on the situation? Why would he mention it at all? If anything, it just makes sense that he wouldn't say anything. Because if he is sadistic, if he does hate the humans, maybe he sees a more, suffering, long-term suffering from Odysseus thinking about, like, the consequences of killing the infant and whatnot. And of course, the story of Epic has to happen, the Odyssey, yada yada. But, like, him not mentioning anything could have been another source of pain for Odysseus. Because once he's home, he sees everything crumble around him. That's greater pain. He didn't expect this, or maybe he did. And that's why he's expecting it now. Because he knows this is a possibility. Because he's paranoid. Will these actions haunt my days? Every man I've slayed is the price I pay endless pain. He's already worn down from the 10 years of war. He didn't want to kill all those men. So if he gets back home, he gets back to his family. And it's all ended because an infant wanted revenge. When he was the one that could have prevented all of that. That would have hurt so much more. So he's thinking about that. He knows Hector has a son. Maybe he didn't know that Hector has a son, so that gives credence to Zeus just actually being there.
But I'm sure that the birth of Astyanax was something that was well known. Maybe Hector even boasted about it, going, "Oh, my son will be so happy to know that his city's well defended when I bring him your heads," or something like that. I think the entire thing depends on whether or not Odysseus knows that Astyanax exists.
Because if he doesn't know, then that gives more credence towards Zeus actually being there. But if he does know, then that's his paranoia. I think it's really just a 50-50 chance on Zeus actually being here. That's so interesting. Not only that, but like in God games, why would he give Odysseus the chance to break free? He sees him suffering on Ogygia. I guess after like 7 years, it could have just been born, but he has the entire Earth to, mess with people on. So like, and he does a lot of messing around, let's be honest here. But like, why would he allow it to happen? Of course, the pride and hubris and all of that, but like, well, same word, but whatever. I think him telling Odysseus about this stuff 20 years in the future is the most out-of-character thing Zeus could have done. And it's the first thing that we see. And it's matched with Odysseus as backing vocals. And it's matched with Zeus not being there during Just a Man. It's matched with Zeus being not there. It's matched with Odysseus' paranoia. If this turns out to actually be real, that this is all paranoia, that this is all Odysseus in his own head, then that makes this so much more interesting. Because of course the entire thing about Epic is, when does a man become a monster? Well, if you're dealing with the effects of war on your mind, with PTSD, with all of the paranoia that comes with it, that all of this would not be worth it, that someday this will all crumble and fall and that you will have nothing. But you can't tell that it's not real. When you live in a world ruled by gods, and you think that one of those gods is telling you about this, that he will end your family. Of course, the entire conversation revolves around Astyanax being the one to kill his family. But what if that was never the case? Because in Greek mythology, Astyanax never goes for revenge. In the versions where he survives, because there are versions where he survives, he never goes after the Greeks. He never tries to get revenge. That's never a possibility. That's never what happens. This is just paranoia. I think that makes this all so much more interesting. I really don't know what to say. I can't really say anything definitive. I don't want to say that this is the truth, but now I can't say that the sadistic nature and hatred for humanity is definitely a thing. But like, what if Zeus isn't here? That, I think, is the most interesting question of all of this. Because it changes so much for Epic. Anyways, yeah, back to past me. That's all I had to say. Now, on to Zeus. The main things that we see is him trying to be subtle to begin, but he eventually gives up and forces his victory by essentially flexing his power. I think we can all agree that this is just what Zeus is like. I mean, it's only fitting that he'd be the main god of the sky. The underworld and the oceans technically have a ceiling, but the sky doesn't have one, so, it's large enough to fit his ego. Now, like I mentioned earlier, he may also be a bit of a sadist, particularly when it comes to humans. The background vocals during his portion, being Odysseus himself, itself actually supports this. It's using his own voice to get into his head about the current situation, and to remind him of what's at stake with,
You can say goodbye to Penelope.
If you have a really good memory, keep note of this. And I will also try to do so, because I once again did not mention what this was in reference to. God damn it, Pasme, why do you do this? Yeah, that's another one down. There's also the use of the eagle to signify his arrival. As far as I'm aware, it's the bird most commonly associated with him, like the little owl to Athena, and horses to Poseidon. Oh, god damn it, I just remembered Skyfields. We'll just move on. There are, however, other things about eagles that I wanted to talk about, specifically with its coloration. So let's finally move on to the observations and headcanons.
Guys, this orange is Gigantosaurus, or whatever you say, Gigantosaurus, Metamoris, Metamorphic, Giganorstis, Jamornis.
So for the eagle, if it were to ever be shown on screen, it would likely be a black eagle, in coloration, that is. There is a species black eagle, but they're only native to Asia, and I don't know if they ever were to Greece. The reason I bring this up is due to the associations that colors have in Greek mythology. Now, the colors that you'd see in Greek mythology typically line up with what you'd expect today. Green is foliage, life, and fertility, white is purity and holiness, and black is death, mystery, and immorality. Of course, there's mythology-specific associations with each color, but the interesting parts is how they're used within the mythology itself. I'm going to use examples from the Iliad and the Odyssey itself to help drive it home with a bit more of a relevant connection, and I'll have the quotes on screen as well. Now, like I mentioned, eagles are typically associated with Zeus for a few reasons, such as Zeus's childhood friend, Aesos, which literally means eagle in Greek, being turned into an eagle by Hera, as she feared a love between the two brewing, or the version where an eagle created by Gaia appears before Zeus at the start of the Titanomachy. Something like that, and it would be taken as a token of good omen of victory, thus making a golden eagle an emblem of Zeus. This time, golden eagles are actually in Greece, at least currently, so this could be literal. The coloration itself probably takes priority, however, for a few reasons I will get into in a minute. Regardless, the association shows itself a few times in Homer's works, like in the Odyssey Book 2, where Telemachus invokes Zeus's name against a suitor, and Zeus responds by sending two eagles. The two eagles could be representing Odysseus and Telemachus maybe, but I think it could also be Zeus and Athena themselves. Athena obviously has stakes in the matter with Odysseus, and even turns into an eagle twice in the Odyssey, like I mentioned before. And of course, is the daughter of Zeus, whose associated bird is the eagle. But why would Zeus have a stake in this himself? Well, alongside being the god king and thunderbringer, he's the god of law, order, and hospitality. Thank God he's not the god of husbandry. Anyways, the suitors of Penelope show themselves to be in violation to all of these, so Zeus, being the god of this and that, would likely be very aware of their transgressions. It brings up the question of why didn't he do anything about them for 4 years or so? And while I don't know why, it does feed into the idea of it being a bit of a sadistic game for Zeus, like I mentioned in the character analysis. It may even be the detail that Jorge based that character trait off of, I don't know. If I were to guess, Zeus probably didn't do anything because it was a case of let Telemachus figure it out. Maybe? I'm not entirely sure, but whatever. There's also an instance in the Iliad, Book 17, where Menelaus is compared to an eagle. It states,
So saying, fair-haired Menelaus departed, glinting warily on every side as an eagle, which, men say, hath the keenest sight of all winged things under heaven, of whom, though he be on high, the swift-footed hare is not unseen, as he croucheth beneath the leafy bush. But the eagle swoopeth upon him, and forthwith seizeth him, and robbeth him of life.
Why so much eth? Why? Anyways.
Even so then, Menelaus, nurtured of Zeus, did thy bright eyes range every whither over the throng of thy many comrades, if so be they might have sight of Nestor's son yet alive.
Menelaus is compared to an eagle, and stated to be nurtured of Zeus himself, a pretty easy connection to make. I actually think that's a pattern that appears multiple times, where whenever an eagle is mentioned, Zeus is not far behind it, but that could also just be because it's Zeus and has a lot of importance to the world, so I don't know. There are 3 instances, however, that I want to show you that will help get across the coloration theory. The first is in the Iliad Book 15, where Hector would attack Greeks while they were on their ships, and would be compared to a tawny eagle daring to strike birds upon a river's banks. The main thing that's important is the coloration, which is tawny, aka brown. Brown itself is associated with error 404, data not found. Nothing. The color brown itself isn't associated with anything in Greek mythology. No god, no location, nothing that I'm aware of at the least. Though that doesn't mean we can't make inferences. Brown would likely be associated with the dirt, considering, well, have you seen dirt? It's pretty brown. Because of this, dirt would probably be connected to earth, fertility, and growth, much like the color green is. There's also the possibility of a combination, such as a red and gold combination. Gold is associated with wealth, divinity, power, and glory. This is why the golden eagle being a coloration, and thus symbolism, still makes a lot of sense. Plus, golden eagles aren't exactly golden, mainly like black to light brown. Red itself is of course blood, anger, passion, and war. But the most likely combination would be red and black, with black again being associated with death, immorality, and mystery. Now, once again, tawny eagles are an actual species of eagle, but they're mainly native to only the lower 70% of Africa and India. They do appear in northern Africa along the coast opposite of Spain, so it's theoretically possible, but the coloration being symbolism makes much more sense in every single instance. In this instance, Hector is attacking the Greeks in a situation that's likely more favorable to the enemy rather than him, hence the use of daring, or dareth, in the quote. Compare this to a moment in the Iliad Book 21, where Achilles is compared to a black eagle during his fight with the river god of Troy, Scamander. Obviously a connection between them and Scamandrius, or Astyanax. This fight would occur in the middle of a rampage by Achilles, after his friend Patroclus' death. He's already killed a few people and started to charge towards Troy to challenge Hector. It reads,
Scamander rushed upon him with dark-crested wave, that he might stay good the Achilles from his labor, and ward off ruin from the Trojans. But the son of Peleus rushed back as far as a spear cast with the swoop of a black eagle, the mighty hunter, that is alike the strongest and swiftest of winged things. Like him he dareth, and upon his breast the bronze rang terribly, when he swerved from beneath the flood and fled ever onward. And the river followed after, flowing with a mighty roar.
Hector was compared to a brown eagle that had much more depth and variability, while Achilles, a man who's already slain quite a few people in this moment and plans to kill more, is compared to a black eagle, a color that's more definitive in its associations, and especially that of death and immorality. In Book 22, Achilles would actually slay Hector and then start parading him around Troy in a sign of disrespect, bringing in a bit more of the immorality aspect in, if his killings didn't do that already. This all culminates in a moment in the Iliad Book 24, where King Priam, Hector's father, would call to Zeus for aid. Priam says,
Father Zeus, that rulest from Ida, most glorious, most great, grant that I may come unto Achilles' hut as one to be welcomed and to be pitied. And send a bird of omen, even thy swift messenger that to thyself is dearest of birds and is mightiest in strength. Let him appear upon my right hand, to the end that, marking the sign with mine own eyes, I may have trust therein, and go my ways to the ships of the Danans of fleet steeds.
Like we've seen multiple times already, the Zeus mightiest in strength of Zeus's would be the eagle, but it continues.
So spake he in prayer, and Zeus the counselor heard him. Forthwith he sent an eagle, surest of omen among winged birds, the dusky eagle, even the hunter, that men also call the black eagle. Wide as is the door of some rich man's high-roofed treasure chamber, a door well fitted with bolts. Even so wide spread his wings to this side and to that, and he appeared to them on the right, darting across the city. And at sight of him they waxed glad, and the hearts in the breast of all were cheered.
Once again, we see the black eagle used once more associated with the situation involving death. That is to say, the already dead Hector. The associations of eagles to Zeus, black to death and immorality, and the situation that Homer himself uses them in all point to this being specifically a black eagle that Odysseus sees. It's likely a connection that many of the war know at this point. So once again, imagine that you're Odysseus. The horse scheme has gone well, and you seem to be winning the battle, and possibly the war. Suddenly, you're attacked by some enemy that appears out of nowhere, possibly being of lightning, that's my headcanon, that catches you so off guard, you get stunned for a couple of seconds. You finally regain your breath enough to barely get out a single question.
Who was that?
Then you hear a familiar sound. You look up expectantly, hoping to see your friend and mentor, Athena. But instead of a friend, you see the silhouette of a black eagle, a speck against the backdrop of Zeus, looking directly at you. I don't know if the stage play, or more likely animated version, would show the eagle at all, but if it does, and it's not a black eagle, I will be slightly saddened, because, it was right there. That line with a magic marker, just waiting for the power saw and everything. Part of me wonders if drinking this much water is a safe thing. Oh boy. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the in-universe reason as to why the musical is, well, a musical. When it comes to any story, suspension of disbelief is very important, especially for a world where singing can break out at any moment and be completely normal in universe. But why is that actually the case? Well, music starting out of nowhere is the best way to ruin the audience's immersion with a work, so you do what you can to avoid that. The way that most music-based productions, such as operas, specifically comic operas, and, well, musicals, is with a simple system of rising emotions. You start at a base of acting, but as the emotions within the character rise, the more it starts to become much more for the body to contain, and as such results in singing. Add even more emotions, and eventually get to the additional stuff like dancing. Now, you may have noticed something a bit wrong with this system in the context of epic. There's no acting. Because there's no stage play or animated version, there's no acting between the songs in order to fill the gaps of the story. This is actually one of the things that I think holds epic back a little, at least in its current form. Since we only have the songs to work with, and we don't get a sentence or two at the beginning of the songs, we only have the songs as is in order to get the entire story across. This in turn means that we only have the songs to get across why the characters sing in the first place. In a world where singing can break out at any moment, the reasons for why should always be considered. If we take into consideration the system of rising emotions, then it gives us a good reason why most of the songs start outside of, well, it's a musical, so therefore there must be music. However, the reason I say most is because there are some that I don't think exactly fits this criteria of rising emotion. Those being Full Speed Ahead, Storm, Keep Your Friends Close, possibly, Puppeteer is also notable as well, Done For, The Underworld, Dangerous, and Charybdis. Just a Man is an honorable mention here, but the song had to exist considering the situation and importance it plays for the story and Odysseus as a whole. It's more of a necessary song. Plus, the presence of elevated emotions in the moment could be considered a likely reason for it started anyways. So therefore, Full Speed Ahead is the first that meets the criteria. The reason I bring all of this up is because there has to be a different reason as to why these songs would start. If it's not the emotions, then it has to be something that keeps the suspension of disbelief going. And, well, it's pretty much emotion adjacent, and I think that's why Odysseus sings so much in universe. He starts singing as a method of stress relief. The key difference between emotions and stress is that stress is a driver, while emotions are the results, and more particularly, stress levels and emotion levels. Imagine it like this. There are two gauges in front of us. One is emotion, and the other is stress. Emotions can essentially keep filling and building higher and higher, just essentially stretching in order to accommodate for it. But stress will always have a cap that you can reach before it starts draining, even if training can move where that cap is. Too much stress on a bone, and it breaks. Too much stress on a muscle, and it tears. Too much stress on the mind, and you have a breakdown. This is what I was talking about earlier during the negative section for the line,
What sort of imminent threat does he pose that I cannot avoid?
I think in that moment, the stress would have built up enough to be equal with the levels of emotions, thus breaking his singing a little. You also have to remember that none of the music and instruments we hear outside of the vocals is diegetic, aka in universe. So the only thing that the characters have is their mind and vocals to go off of. So in a moment where stress is far too great and overshadows the emotions, then surely the emotional foundation of why a song started in the first place would crack and potentially break as the mind did. For example, A Girl Worth Fighting For in Milan. We all know how that scene goes. It's all upbeat and cheery, then they get a shock of the system that sends the stress rocketing up. Of course, the circumstances here are different, as it's not the end of the song, and we don't want the song to end. Well, that's perfectly fine, because if the stress were to ever be overtaken by the emotion gauge, either by falling or emotions rising above, then the singing would return for the characters. Now you may think this all is stupid and makes no sense, and that using an outside musical is irrelevant because it's not epic. Okay, well then how about Mutiny? It's not one of the songs I mentioned earlier, because it doesn't fit the criteria. The song starts because the emotions of losing his friends is too high to keep his voice low, so he starts singing. That is to say,
Tell me you did not know that would happen.
Eurylochus does.
Say something! I can't!
Odysseus doesn't sing until a minute 20 into Mutiny.
Lower your weapon.
No can do.
After the emotions of Eurylochus enacting a mutiny has built up enough to overtake the stress.
Fight you, brother. You know you'd have done the same.
If you want all the power, you must carry all the blame.
Even Eurylochus slips off of singing when the stress is built up enough. These aren't just creative differences. It's things that were done within the musical itself, but also subtly enhance the musical by giving explanations for moments left ambiguous. Now, I don't know if any of this was actually intentional. It could have just been something that Jorge and Armando thought made more sense in the moment or just sounded better. If it was though, then I'll give him the leeway that he's been making and releasing the musical saga by saga, which means that he may have realized this aspects of the music between the releases of the Troy and Thunder saga. Because I can't give favor and certainty, however, then I have to mention it regardless. There is also always the possibility that in universe the gods just sing a lot so the mortals follow suit. You know, that's possible, but like, not as fun, so whatever. Okay, so I was going to drink again, but the second I picked up my water bottle, my entire body just became ill. I'm gonna just put that down for now. And then my body's back to normal. Yeah, okay, things may be going wrong inside me. Now this next topic is mainly theory due to a lack of an official visual form, but I don't think the song starts in the Trojan horse. I understand why people think it does, considering the more quiet nature of the opening, but I don't think that's the case. Like, at all. There are a couple of reasons, but only one really has massive implications on the entire story, and mainly for one character. First off, while the singing starts quiet and slow, Odysseus literally starts yelling soon after, with everyone else joining in. Plus, they start the whole chanting, so everyone involved is perfectly fine with being loud in this moment. If they were in the horse, they'd probably already be within Troy's walls or were being led to the gate as they speak. In either case, I think they would be, I don't know, not trying to draw attention to the interior of the horse in any way. Not only that, but why the hell would they wait until they're already in the horse to give a briefing on the mission and why they're climbing inside a massive wooden horse? It definitely would have taken a long time to build, so they had time beforehand. In every way, the men's actions don't indicate any modicum of stealth or consideration for it, so it's highly unlikely for that alone that they'd be in the horse at the start. All of this, however, is completely overshadowed by one more detail of the song. The ticking clock until about a minute and 6 seconds. In Epic, a ticking clock is used to indicate the use of quick thought, a power that Athena uses in order to quickly communicate with someone in an instant. However, there are a few things that stick out to me if that were the case. 1. If they were in the horse, at least 50 men minimum would be included in the ability's use. Now, Athena's control over quick thought is probably extensive considering that she's a goddess, but she's literally the goddess of wisdom, master of war, aka goddess of warfare, and self-titled warrior of the mind. So that brings me to the second point. 2. It would be really stupid for them to use quick thought on anyone other than Odysseus at this moment. It reveals her presence amongst the mortals, which gods were known to conceal when doing so, typically by disguising themselves as human. It also reveals her assistance and potentially preference towards Odysseus. This was something that was stated or speculated by Menelaus and Nestor in the Odyssey, but from what I know, it was never really shown in the Iliad to actually be the case, so it's likely a similar case here. Now, those speculations could have been used as an inspiration as to why they're on the horse, showing that, yeah, Athena has preference for him, but this is all before mentioning that it's just a really horrible decision tactically, as it reveals info that very few mortals would know about. If that information were to make its way to the ears of those with malice in their hearts, then they would likely bulk themselves up even more, and possibly with aid from another god, all in order to make it a fair fight against Odysseus. You only lose to those you underestimate. In the case of Odysseus, everyone could have the highest opinions of him and still yet underestimate him because he has Athena on his side. And let's say in the off chance that Athena doesn't reveal her presence somehow, and no one knows that Quick Thought is active. You expect me to believe that the second Odysseus starts singing, not one person would go, "What are you doing?" Evidently, there are many problems with this being the case, which is why I don't think they're in the horse to start it all off. Or at least they're not in the city yet. But most importantly, I don't even think Athena was in the area at the time. Allow me to explain. After this. Alright, that time I only drank half a bottle. I'm pacing myself now. I kinda have to. The first time we know for certain that Athena was present was in Warrior of the Mind. And with that, we can infer that she was also there during Open Arms, considering that they're most likely connected songs. There is a possibility that she was present during the sack of Troy, but her only being indicated via a ticking clock is noteworthy. Like I mentioned before, the ticking clock indicates Quick Thought, but there's one time where it's not used in a manner we expect. Love in Paradise shows Athena going back through Odysseus' journey since they'd last seen each other 10 years before. From the beginning of the song until about a minute in, where it transitions to Ogygia, we hear the clock ticking in the background. Now, I will be the first to point out, there are actually two different types of ticking throughout the musical. The first that we hear is the slow and pendulating ticking.
Alright, my brothers, listen closely.
And the second is what we hear in Love in Paradise, which is a much faster and detailed ticking.
Old friend, it's been 10 years since I left.
You would maybe think that these are an indicator for Quick Thought, or I don't know, memory read? Is there a name for what she does here? But I don't think that's actually what it is. I think it's more of an indicator for the tempo and tone of the moment rather than what power is actually being used. The main reason for this is because both are used for what's likely the same power in the very next song, God Games. In the segment with Aphrodite, we hear the fast ticking, while once Ares comes in, it switches to the slower version.
Wait! Please reconsider this.
Really, Athena? These old tricks?
Ares!
According to these two snippets Jorge uploaded, these are both Quick Thought being used, or time stop before he changed how it worked. So both versions could indicate Quick Thought. That's assuming he didn't change anything after the snippet was released though. It's for the same reason, however, that both versions could indicate something different because, again, it's used in Love in Paradise, when Quick Thought likely isn't being used at that moment. So both versions of the ticking clock could indicate Quick Thought or memory read. Seriously, does that have a name for it? Because I have no idea. Now going back to Love in Paradise, the first memory that we hear is the end of Remember Me. Now the last time they actually saw each other was in My Goodbye, the song after Remember Me. So immediately we see something that shows the memories being an emphasizer rather than 100% accurate to what we know. With that in mind, just because the first thing that we hear is
Remember me, I am the infamous Odysseus!
that doesn't mean it's the first thing that Athena saw during her memory read. I'm just going to refer to it as such for the sake of ease. I think it's very plausible that at some point during this time frame, Athena went all the way back to Troy to see what caused a change in Odysseus, with the ticking clock as an indicator to this happening. Now this could have been due to a few reasons. One, she just had the idea to do so, considering what she could remember 10 years after the fact. Two, if she did see My Goodbye once more, she'd be reminded of Odysseus saying,
Unlike you, every time someone dies, I'm left to deal with the strain.
While that does make sense in the Cyclops saga, their first argument, at least that we see, happens before it in the Warrior of the Mind. This could have led to the idea that something happened in Troy that Athena wasn't privy to before. 3. The most likely option would be from the underworld. Odysseus states clearly,
I keep thinking of the infant from that night. I keep thinking of the infant from that night.
I don't think Athena would just move past that. Even if she had no clue beforehand. She'd probably go, what infant? Go back to the very beginning and finally find out that Odysseus was having to carry the weight of killing an infant. An infant that reminds Odysseus of his own son. Athena and Odysseus were likely very close for a long time, so Athena would definitely know how much Telemachus means to Odysseus, especially considering the story of Odysseus feigning insanity to avoid going to war, just to have Telemachus' own life used to force him into it. This is also after Athena and Telemachus had met in Epic, so it's possible that she's becoming a lot more empathetic as a result, and much more likely to know this is a horrifying thing for mortals, but especially for Odysseus. Now this would all require Athena to not be there during the sack of Troy, but there are multiple reasons as to why this would be the case, including reasons from Greek mythology itself. Firstly, remember that whole their first argument, at least that we see, thing earlier? Well, it's possible that arguments have been happening for a while by the time that epic starts. Considering how jovial and upbeat the relationship seemed to be for a long time during Warrior of the Mind, evidently some friction between Athena and Odysseus has occurred and occurred over the years. I highly doubt Athena would just go from an optimistic,
You are a warrior of the mind,
to a borderline venom-filled,
don't disappoint me.
out of nowhere and without reason. It could be as simple as Odysseus didn't want to be in the Trojan War, while Athena has one mission.
Create the greatest warrior.
Not to mention that Odysseus has been in war for 10 years at this point, so there's likely going to be some spats between the two in terms of strategies and tactics, not to mention general stress from the entire situation. Secondly, Athena could just trust Odysseus with his part of the battle. Considering the history they have together, it's possible she could have just been elsewhere in Troy, or even the world, just dealing with something else. They don't exactly have a fast way to communicate with each other, so if the day came to execute the attack and Athena didn't know, she could have just missed out on it all, which would be really funny, but I digress. Now this could actually be in combination with the first point, where it could be Athena trying to teach Odysseus a lesson after an argument or disagreement, by making him exert much more effort to achieve victory. This lesson could even be, you need me, similar to what we get in Warrior of the Mind. Thirdly, there's a reason from Greek mythology itself, Locrian Ajax. It wasn't written by Homer himself, but it was in the epic cycle, so take that as you will. There are multiple stories in which Locrian Ajax, aka Lesser Ajax, aka Little Ajax, is involved in the sack of Troy, and during the entire ordeal, Greek mythology's Cassandra, at the feet of an altar to Athena herself, Poseidon approved. In the process of this act, it's said that he actually damages the altar in the process, which prompts the Greeks, namely Odysseus, to call for his death via stoning. Eventually, they decided against doing so, because they're bastards, but it left open the door for many authors. A good chunk of Greek heroes and characters that we know would die or suffer in their attempts to return home, something that many would credit to Athena's wrath, attributing it to this act of crime. Now, I don't know if Athena's wrath is even a factor in Epic's universe, but her wrath isn't the focus here. It's where it came from. While little Ajax was supposed to stay back, that doesn't mean he actually did. Think about it. A notable Greek hero whose name is a literal embodiment of living in someone else's shadow, and you're supposed to just stay back during what could be the greatest accomplishment of your life? It's damn near guaranteed he'd let his pride get the best of him. Locrian Ajax was also said to be only a late teen or young adult during the Trojan War, so inexperience, youth, and a society built around honor in battle would absolutely drive him into the fray. The scheme was probably going to be the end of the war if it succeeded, so why would he stay back? All of this is why earlier I said, just know that there's a reason Odysseus wanted him to stay back. At a baseline, it would be his youth and Odysseus not wanting someone so young to get himself killed. There's possibly a factor that Odysseus wanted as much credit as he could, considering that he never wanted to be there in the first place, so might as well get what you can. And of course, there's the fact that they've been at war for a long time now, so Odysseus would probably know what type of person Locrian Ajax is, and what he would do if he got the chance. The line of
Little Ajax will stay back
likely being inspired by the entire story. Now, I would say that maybe Jorge just didn't want Locrian Ajax acts to be a part of the story, thus the line. But like, legendary? Little Wolf? Hold them down? I highly doubt that's the case. Now there's just a couple of more things that I wanted to mention before we get into the tier list. So allow me to pivot a little into something a bit different.
Steno and Euria lived in their own corner of the world. The sisters were isolated from others, as they were often seen as dreadful and unseemly. with mouths spinning past their ears and eyes that could strike fear and pause in any who dared to look. There is no place amongst mortals for them. Despite being separated from the rest of the living, they accepted this little life they had, as they had each other. Both knew that the world could be unforgiving, but that no matter what, they would at least be there for the other in their time of need. Steno found herself as the laborer of the two, gathering supplies and food, while Uriel would be the one to prepare and craft whatever they needed. The island they inhabited wasn't the most expansive, but it gave way to many resources that ensured survival. Dead branches from overhanging trees for fires were never in short supply, while rivers brought them fresh water and fish from the lone mountain, one they affectionately called Mount Feta. Little game gave way to a few sources of food, so Steno spent chunks of the day hunting for fish when light still held high, while Uriel traveled the area to check the makeshift traps for anything extra, gathering less abundant articles when stumbled across. They were never in need, yet always in want. The cycle perpetuated by their existence. Uriel would often wander the beaches as stars overtook the sky, admiring the beauty of the horizon as the ocean consumed the sun, her stroll running late as she enjoyed the wind's whispers. Tonight would bring her gaze down, however, as on the beach lay a strange silhouette, unmoving as the waters stretched to drag it into the depths. Uriel would cautiously make her way over, unsure on what could make it to their home, but was shocked at the sight before her. Laying there in the sand was a woman's body, drenched, water crawling out of her mouth as what little energy they had left was spent shivering and attempting to free themselves of Poseidon's embrace. Uriel would act with haste, adjusting the woman so her back was to the ground, face averting from the heavens, and her slithering seaweed-like hair to the side, before pushing down on the woman's chest in an attempt to save the life of another Forsaken. "Steno!" she cried out hopelessly. She knew her sister wasn't far. They never were and never would be, but she screamed as if she had crossed Oceanus and was never to return. She'd take one deep inhale before expunging what she could past the freezing lips of one on the precipice. Each push on the chest, a desperate attempt to fight. Each breath, a cry for help, and each moment, an eternity closer to death. She didn't even have time to react before Steno would move her hands out of the way to take over. "You get the food ready tonight, and prepare cleaning supplies!" Steno barked out as she dragged the body, more akin to stone than flesh in the freezing winds. Steno would continue compressions once they reached grass, while Uriel bolted towards the cave, lacking the time to address the salt water around her eyes. Her feet stung with each mountainous pebble stepped on, each branch breaking under the weight of her gait, until she finally reached a small cave, now cavernous. Uriel rushed past the nearly finished wicker basket, kicking it to the wall and causing it to come undone, picking up the sharpened rock to continue the shoddy half-skinned fish. The fire to her side felt as cold as Boreas's gaze, compared to the heat of her heartbeat, each pulse reverberating within the enclosed walls, making her incapable of hearing the crashing of stone on stone. Each crack of the embers invited a glance towards the entrance, but each time the mouth was empty of substance, aside from ashes of old grass and leaves. She finally finished the second fish, piercing its being with a small branch to lay above the fire, then ventured into the void of open air with a wooden bucket in hand. The beckoning of waves and cries of birds fell on deaf ears as the world surrounding Steno became nothing. The only audible sounds were that of her exertions with each pump of the sternum. The moon disappeared behind the clouds in her mind as she leaned forward once more, stopped only by the sudden rush of water and coughing. She turned the woman back to her side as the grass was crushed under the weight of liquid life, patting her back to assist with the disposal of death. Weak and labored breaths returned color to their skin, eyes heavy with exhaustion and mind elsewhere. The woman laid still once more, unconscious to reality and that she still yet survives. Steno would take the moment to catch her breath and think of what to do as the moonlight returned. The woman was bare outside of sand and dirt littering her form, long hair completely drenched and clumped at the ends, and what appeared to be darkened areas around her wrist and neck. Steno forced herself back to her feet, strength gone from her limbs as her mind became one with the clouds. Focusing her mind once more, she curled the woman up into a sitting position, wrapping an arm around her neck as she crouched in preparation. She then pulled and hinged as hard as she could to lift the woman onto her side, grabbing under their leg to keep them in the air as she shifted the woman to her back, nearly stumbling in the process. She wraps the stranger's arms around her neck and leaned forward as she secured her hold of the thighs before trekking onward back to the cave. The path traveled was a familiar friend, but the smell of sprinkled blood littered her thoughts, a smell known far too well for their home. Careful not to jostle the lading, she quickened her pace, seeing the glow of flames through the foliage. Zeno followed the path to avoid the trees, noting the new path of damage that led straight through the brush. Finally rounding the corner to the entrance, Zeno found it empty aside from 2 fish cooking over the fire, one partially burnt on the sunken side. As gently as manageable, Zeno placed the woman upon a bed of greenery before hopping over to flip the fish before he was lost. Footsteps, sloshing water, and winces approached the cave as she grabbed a deficient Doru and searched for her basket, clicking her tongue at the remains against the wall.
Yuri, are you hurt? I smelled blood on the way back.
She yelled out as she searched for an alternative. The sounds of steps stopped at the mouth, but no answer followed. Zeno twisted in alarm, preparing the door for defense, dropping it upon seeing her sister standing perfectly fine with a bucket dangling from her hands. The only sign of something wrong being cuts on her legs and the disbelief on her face. Zeno tracked her eyes over to the occupant of her bed, fearing the worst, only to find her own echoing the unspoken revelation as the door clattered to the ground. Fire. The only audible sound around her was fire. The collapsing of wood crashing like waves, sending a spike of fear through her exhausted soul. Warmth. The only present feeling she could recognize was warmth. Her mind betraying her shivering body, betraying the feeling of burning skin traveling from head to toe. Salt. The only lingering taste in her mouth was salt. Her stinging throat indicating one she could no longer pray to forget. Fish. The only pungent smell she knew was cooked fish. The lingering of smoked meat and eczema implied food, but for whom was only a concerning question. Shadows. The only informing sight above her were shadows. A figure dominated the ceiling as ridges provided shelter to crimes forevermore, her eyes cracking open as she pleaded they stayed closed. As the nightmares danced with each flicker of flame, her mind struggled to recognize the immediate area. The bristles and blades of grass she laid upon felt like knives in her back, the calamus making an oven over her, while her limbs felt weak and heavy as guilt, the only repose coming from the shivering having partially subsided. Her head throbbing with each agonizing beat, marching like a horse at war, but eventually slowing as her vision relinquished itself to her control. A mix of numbed pain and alleviated weight dominated her body as she lumbered her vision towards the mother of the shadows, but their presence remained hidden behind the corner of her eyes. What? A whispered voice revealed in recognition. The language familiar, but accent foreign. Her mind sent in a whirlpool of uncertainty. The shuffling of feet over yonder revealed the shelter moderately sized, while the scraping of wood on stone pierced the only bubble of security that remained, only exasperated by the quickly approaching voice of the woman.
Here, I'll pour it in slowly. Just try to drink it if you can.
The figure overtook her vision as consciousness started to fade, but her head lifted slightly and the slow trickling of cold wine entering her mouth keeping her present, with a taste so sweet it could be mistaken for ambrosia. She gave all her attention to forcing a swallow, getting just one in as the flow stopped. She tried to squeak a solitary thanks, but her voice weak resulted in a silent note known only to her.
No, save your energy. You can rest now. It'll be fine. You're gonna be okay.
The voice faded into nothing as rest finally conquered her, the tension in her body releasing and revealing the aching all over, as darkness took hold once more. Steno and Uriel lived in their own corner of the world. The sisters were isolated from others, as they were never seen as pleasing and welcoming, with hours spent keeping watch and reserves on the brink of depletion for the sake of one who found themselves on their doorstep. There was no place for mortals among them. Yet this one intrigued them, intruding into their domain unknowingly, and their appearance conflicting with immortality, Both sisters knew the world could be ruthless, but that no matter what, they would be kind to any others in their time of need. And if the woman would ever wake up, they'd be able to ask many questions that provided many conversations over the centuries. If. Steno had just returned from fishing, her haul being half of the typical, but enough to keep pace. Her legs shook slightly from standing in the river, her toes dragging through the dirt as she lacked the energy. Uriel was worse off, as she found the sister borderline asleep with a half-dry cleaning rag in her hand, tipping to and fro, dangerously close to the fire that had gone out while she was gone. She placed a destitute basket at the entrance, and her hand on Uriel's cheek, a gentle shake rousing her from a glorified collapse.
Back. Did it go well?
She slightly slurred her speech, nestling her head into the pad of comfort on her face. If you're gonna sleep, then at least get in the bed. You're gonna get yourself hurt if you don't.
No, I'm fine. I guess how about... Promise.
Don't. You know that's a promise you can't keep. Steno started bringing her sister over to the raised platform, but Uriel didn't go willingly. Mostly because she couldn't even process what they were doing. I'll be fine for a few hours by myself. You get some rest, and you can take second watch tonight.
You're just gonna stay up the entire night yourself.
And you were gonna sleep the entire night yourself. So might as well make it count. The guests from the bed instantly frozen, both turning to see the stranger breathing fast with eyes unevenly opened, staring up to the heavens with uncertainty and fear presiding on her face. The cave stood still for what felt like forever, as calm slowly returned to the hearts of the three. The woman blinked a few times, legs popping as she stretched with what little mobility she could muster.
Would you like some fish?
The stranger turned as Uriel's question broke the silence, baffled at the sight. Before her were two beings that just looked wrong. Their cheeks poked past the peaks of their ears, fangs emerging from behind their lips, and an unsettling pattern of cracks across their skin. Their dark hair served as a backdrop to their most disturbing feature, that of their sharp red eyes that were staring through everything she was. Mustering a single sound, the stranger asked for clarification.
Fish. We have food, if you're hungry. Wine, too.
Steno answered more clearly than her sister, confidence absent in her words. A converging moment of contemplation had passed before a slight nod initiated action. Uriel began to rise to her feet before Steno took the opportunity to aid her, starting towards her bed, but turning to bring her over to the stranger's place of rest after realizing her sister would just crawl over anyways. Uriel kneeled down next to the bed with her aid, careful not to step on the poorly maintained chitin she donned. Steno then walked over to a pile of their supplies, grabbing a cup of metal that stuck out amongst the primitive tools they seemed capable of making, before exiting into the daylight once more.
She's going to get them. Don't worry.
Uriel let out a wide yawn, wider than what a human jaw should be capable of. With a closer look, the stranger could see the reason. The cracks on their skin were the edges of scales that were faint, a mix between reptilian and human. A victim, like she was. The realization should have taken her heart, but she remained calm as the woman's eyes looked at her, a piercing red accompanied by the soft expression as she laid her head on her arms. She couldn't help but stare, unsure on what to say in the moment, if words could ever find purchase.
I'm sorry you ended up here.
The woman began to speak softly as her eyes struggled apart from sleep.
But it'll be fine. You have me and my sister to help you. She's Steno, and I'm Uriel. Can you remember your name?
Silence passed between the two as the stranger sat there, lips unsure on speaking, and mind racing. The only feeling that spread through her mind was a sensation of numbness, prompting hesitation and initiative. Her breath finally broke the air.
Bellis!
She threw her tainted weapon to the side as she rushed to her friend. The strike hit right in the chest, sliding perfectly between the ribs and piercing the heart itself. She lifted her body as the gasp of air became the gurgling of blood, screaming out for Apollo and even Pion. The eyes staring back at her relayed one simple request that she'd never be able to accomplish. The reflection of tears soon outshined her eyes, her pleading words going unheard, as they faded into the clutches of Hades. Blood and tears stained her hands as the streams of red trickled off the fresh corpse that lay in her arms. Lifetimes passed in the span of a few seconds, apprehensive footsteps being the only piece of reality she couldn't escape. The heavy thud stopped at her side, hiding the scene from Helios as the last voice she ever wanted to hear spoke up. I'm sorry. Her tears and gasps stopped as she processed his words.
Sorry? You're... sorry. Is that what you always say to her?
Pain and venom filled her throat. She looked up to her father's face, completely hidden from the light, devoid of all emotion, aside from the ever-so-slightest hint of regret. She watched as he struggled to speak, his fingers clenching over the rims of the shield he carried. Zeus slowly closed his mouth, opting to gently place the shield next to her, recognizing his presence was better suited elsewhere. The shadow leaving allowed the sun to shine once more on the two, with the added reflection of another. The shield donned the visage of a face, one she once knew, one who had served as her own diligent Heria, one who prayed to her day and night, one who sacrificed much in her name, one she had abandoned, one she had betrayed, one she had condemned, one she had assailed, one she had forsaken, one who had a home, one who had a family, one who had a name!
Medusa. My name's Medusa. I'm gonna say it now. Don't expect these to be a consistent part of the videos. I was gonna just talk about the two myths, considering, well, that's the point of the video. But unfortunately, I had another thought. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. It will happen again. Not the short story thing, but the thinking thing. Well, actually, the short stories could come back every once in a while. I was actually gonna do like one chapter per video, where each saga had their own short story. But then my brain hit the corner of my skull and went, well, hold on now. Anyways, for those of you that don't recognize this story, it's of Medusa during the first part, and then Athena in the second part. Basically, this took way too long to simply tell you that Athena, in some myths, had killed her childhood best friend Pallas due to Zeus's interference with the Aegis. The Aegis is a shield or armor, depending on who you ask, donning the visage of a Gorgon, though some people just say it was Medusa's head specifically. Medusa is important because, well, we don't actually have the myth that I'm building off of here. There are talks about Medusa being a victim to Poseidon's lust, but there's also versions where Medusa, Stheno, and Uriel were all just sisters from the beginning. You know, I should probably just start from there. Basically, Stheno and Uriel are Gorgon sisters that are immortal, likely due to their lineage, which typically states the primordial sea god Phorcys and sea monster Ceto as their parents. However, Medusa is also considered one of their sisters, with the notable detail that she is an immortal. This likely led to the stories where Medusa, a priestess of one of Athena's temples, would be Greek mythologied by Poseidon in the temple. Since the myth is lost as far as I'm aware, we don't exactly know why Athena did what she did next, though some say it was because Poseidon was her uncle and another Olympian, which turned her focus onto the mortal instead. Put simply, Medusa was pleading for Athena's help during the entire act, but they only arrived after it was all said and done, and instead of taking pity on the mortal, she instead punished her by turning her into the Gorgon that we know today, with snakes for hair. The idea with the story is that she was a devoted follower of Athena, choosing chastity to follow in Athena's footsteps as one of the virgin goddesses, but due to her beauty, she still had many men that pined over her, including, of course, Poseidon. Medusa having snakes for hair could actually be exclusive to her, because even Greek authors didn't agree on it. Regardless, I remember someone saying that she often received compliments on her hair, specifically, which made Athena jealous, but again, I'm pretty sure the myth is lost, so take that with a grain of salt. The reason this is all relevant to epic, however, is because Medusa would eventually be hunted down and killed by Perseus as a result of this. An innocent woman betrayed by the one she worshipped with the inflicted punishment resulting in her murder. Her face would then be the one forged onto the aegis that was gifted to Zeus, who again used it to distract Pallas during a sparring match between her and Athena, resulting in Athena killing her best friend. I imagine Athena even used a wooden weapon of some sort, and it was still a fatal blow, because, well, she's a goddess. And as far as I know, Pallas was just a human. So in this single instance, Athena killed her own best friend due to an aegis bearing her biggest regret and mistake. And now, it was given to her as an attempted apology by the one who caused it. These myths are what I think would drive Athena to where we see her at the beginning of epic. A cold, cunning, and calculated warrior of the mind, who's not looking for a friend and only has the goal of creating the greatest warrior. Not only that, but it would also be the perfect reason as to what caused Athena to develop quick thought, as it would have given her time to react in an instance that could have saved someone's life, much like what I think she's doing later in epic. This is all what I mean by the potential for storytelling. Eurylochus and Telemachus both have their portions of their story told by proxy with the musical, but there is so much about Athena that goes unmentioned that I think only elevates the entire story because it shows one going from a man to a monster and possibly back to a man again. A story that mimics Odysseus' own journey throughout the entire musical. Depending on how you feel about infants, I guess. I should probably also mention, the reason I even found out about these stories is because of Athena's epithet of Pallas. Pallas Athene is used multiple times in the Iliad that I know of, which makes sense considering where I actually learned it from, that being the Palladium. The Palladium is a wooden statue of Pallas Athena, a specific version of Athena where she's in armor and ready for a fight, essentially. The epithet actually has 4 possible origins, but they're not that interesting really. One is being the name of a titan she killed, another one being the name of a random soldier that she killed, okay? The third being the name of her apparent real father, yeah, sure, okay, that tried to Greek mythology her. Yeah, you know what? I don't think she killed him hard enough. And of course, the 4th version that I personally subscribe to being her childhood friend that, you guessed it, she killed. She'd then supposedly take the epithet and actually make the Palladium to honor her. Now, the Palladium wasn't mentioned in any of Homer's works, only mentioned after them in the Little Iliad as something that Menelaus and, ironically, Odysseus would steal, as it was said to be a sort of protection totem for Troy. With its removal, it then allowed the whole Trojan horse scheme to work. Do you understand now why storytelling is the biggest influence on my rankings for the songs? Oh yeah, speaking of which. S. Yeah, I'm not going to drag you on any longer. It's S. I will say though, probably on the lower end of S, because I was genuinely debating S-, but I don't think the lack of weight and bits of voice acting being off was enough to knock it down a tier. It sets up a good chunk of the important information by itself, but it also is just the beginning of the entire establishing saga. But I'm not going to put that against it. I mean, all things considered, the first saga is literally just 16 minutes long, which is around the same time frame that you would have most things set up in a typical length movie, which would just be an hour 30. This has an extra hour on top of it. The Horse and the Infant knows its role and does it well, and is all around just a damn good song. The lack of weight will of course keep me wanting, but to let perfection be the enemy of good is to allow evil to take all. And there's enough of that in the world already, so I'm good. With that all being said, I think that's all I have to talk about with The Horse and the Infant. Think being the key word there. I know there's a lot that I'm probably missing, like the notes and the chords and the intervals and progressions and whatnot, but I don't even know how to determine a note by ear, let alone what the names of the notes are off the top of my head, so it'd take a while to try to learn it all, and I'm busy with a bunch of other stuff. I mean, there's A, B, C, F, G, I think E is one maybe? Then there's the sharps and flats that go up and down a half step, technically making a new note, plus major and minor, which I think is the big symbol on the left of the bars? Not to mention time signatures. Like, oh god, what the hell even are those? Evidently, I can't break down everything by myself. When it comes to epic, at least. When it comes to mental breakdowns, I can do it no problem. But epic is like actual music and notes and themes and so much. But considering my lack of deep knowledge and understanding, I obviously have a lot to say. One could say too much. It's me, I'm the one saying too much, please forgive For the love of God, stop me! Anyways, yeah, if you've made it this far, you might be crazier than I am. But regardless, thank you for watching. Or listening, I guess. I don't know how often these videos will come out, unfortunately. The script took me like 27 days alone to type, due to my full-time obligation that's only going to become even tighter soon. And that's before I even got to the recording, which has taken me so far 4 hours and 51 minutes. If it only took me 4 minutes, how fast was I talking? No, it's taken me like 5 hours at this point. And editing itself is probably going to take like another week or 2. 3. 2 weeks. A solid 2 weeks. I don't think every song will take this long to do. Hopefully because I just get better at doing this over time. But also, I can just hopefully use this video as a reference most of the time. The entire intro would be much shorter, not including the story of how we got here. Or how I got here, I suppose. Plus the things I focused on and what impacts the rankings would just be a reminder rather than full details. Basically, I just hope this will be the establishing video for the next 39.
I may have gone too far.
A lot of places, like, are you kidding me? What are you thinking? Anyways, yeah, once again, thank you all for watching. I love you all, and I hope to catch you in the next video, whenever and whatever that shall be. If it's episode 2 of this, then it'll probably be sometime in, 2027 February, because I am insane. See ya.